Chapter 1. Qin Wanru felt that she had a ridiculous dream. In the dream, her life ended in a tragedy. She was like an outsider, watching herself being dragged into the abyss of the nightmare step by step. In the last scene of the dream, she was tortured and cut in half at the waist. Her body was split into two and fell stiffly and twisted under the blood-stained Golden Gate. She was the first woman in the history of the kingdom of Dongzong to be tortured by being cut in half at the waist. The familiar laughter of mockery and sarcasm was faintly discernible in her ears. All these scenes were so vivid, even the bloodthirst and despair were so real. Miss, wake up. Did you have a nightmare again? The voice was faintly discernible in her ears, cutting through the scene of the arrangement of the 99 blood-stained golden gates under the sun. The scene was broken and dispersed like bubbles. Qin Wanru suddenly opened her eyes and clenched her fists tightly. Her sharp nails pierced her hands and her heart was beating violently. She stared gloomily at the edge of the tent above her head and felt cold all over. Miss! Don't be afraid, it's all a dream, it's not real. The sound of footsteps was accompanied by the clear voice of a girl. The curtain of the bed was lifted high, and the 12-year-old face of the maid Qing Yu was clearly reflected in her eyes. It was the lively and clever Qing Yu, not the Qing Yu who was beaten to a bloody pulp in the woodshed in order to protect her in her previous life. This was the second day since she woke up. When she fell asleep last night, her memories before she woke up were repeated like a nightmare. Although some of the memories were broken, it made her more aware that she had been reborn. It was still the same body, but she had returned to the time when she was 11 years old. She stretched out her slender wrist, which was so white that she could clearly see the blue veins under her skin. She raised her head and looked around again. It was indeed the bedroom when she was 11 years old. When the blood and tears intertwined to form the most tragic scene, she finally understood who had pushed her into the netherworld. Miss, are you all right? Seeing that she did not speak and just lay on the bed in a daze, Qing Yu uneasily stretched out her slender hand and worriedly pressed on Qin Wanru's white forehead. I'm fine. How is Nanny Yu? Qin Wanru held Qing Yu's hand and sat up slowly. Her voice was hoarse. Nanny Yu was her wet nurse. Just yesterday, she had sent her to the laundry room because of the greedy words of Nanny Fong, who was in charge of her yard. When Qin Wanru came to her senses again, she found that Nanny Yu had been sick and weak because of too much hard work. She had invited a doctor to treat Nanny Yu yesterday. Now that she had woken up, she remembered this matter. Miss, please drink some water to moisten your throat first. Don't worry, Nanny Yu is much better. I went to see her just now and she said that she slept well last night. She will be fine as long as she recuperates well. Holding Qin Wanru, Qing Yu cleverly reached for a cup of warm water on the table beside the bed and handed it to Qin Wanru. How's the arrangement yesterday? Qin Wanru sat up and took a few sips from the teacup. The warm feeling reminded her that she was alive again. After handing the teacup to Qing Yu, she looked out of the window. Outside the window, bright red wedding silk was tied up and piled up in front of the window and under the porch. This meant that she was going to have a marriage here, a marriage where her younger sister was going to take her elder sister's place to marry. It was the marriage that she yearned for but could not get, that slowly pushed her into a deadly abyss step by step. At that time, she was just 11 years old, right? How could a young man be willing to marry an 11-year-old girl? Qin Yuru was the eldest legal daughter of Ningyuan Army General Qin Huayong, and she was the second legal daughter of Qin Huayong. Qi Tianyu was the eldest legal son of the magistrate of Jiangzhou. As the person with real power in Jiangzhou, Qin Huayong had a good relationship with Magistrate Qi, the highest official of Jiangzhou's ground administration. It could be said that both families were on good terms. Magistrate Qi had long set his eyes on Qin Huayong's eldest legal daughter, Qin Yuru, and wanted to marry her to his eldest legal son, Qi Tianyu, who was about the same age. Magistrate Qi had hinted to Qin Huayong several times about the marriage between the two families, but Qin Huayong had rejected him with the reason that his eldest daughter was still young and wanted to marry later. Thus, the marriage was delayed until a month ago, when Qi Tianyu became a juren, and Ningyuan army general's mansion finally agreed to the marriage. As Qi Tianyu was about to enter the capital to take part in the imperial examination in spring, the ceremony was completed quickly. The purpose of this marriage was for Qi Tianyu to enter the capital with Qin Yuru after he became a juren, so that Qin Yuru could take care of Qi Tianyu. Qi's mansion was overjoyed and prepared to marry Qin Yuru, but unexpectedly, Qin Huayong's wife, Madame D, sent a letter to ask for Qin Yuru's hand in marriage. Madame D immediately felt uneasy. Qi Tianyu was definitely not as good as her nephew, Di Yan, the heir of Duke Yong's mansion, who was in the capital city. She had delayed Magistrate Qi's proposal again and again because she wanted Di Yan to marry Qin Yuru. However, no matter how Madame D hinted, Countess Yong, Madame D's sister-in-law, refused to give in. Seeing that Qin Yuru was not young and could not be delayed any longer, coupled with the fact that Qi Tianyu was a juren, Madame D finally gave in. She did not expect that just when she and Magistrate Qi had decided on the date of the proposal, good news came from the capital. There was only a difference of about 20 days, but Madame D was not satisfied. The wedding ceremony between the two families was almost done, and it was impossible to cancel the marriage even if they wanted to. Madame D and Qin Yuru came up with an evil idea. They asked Nanny Fang to seduce the young and naive Qin Wanru in front of her. They said that Qi Tianyu was supposed to propose to her, but this marriage was snatched by Qin Yuru. Qin Wanru, who had just made a small quarrel with Qin Yuru, could not bear it and cried in front of old grandma, saying that she wanted to marry Qi Tianyu. Before old grandma could ask clearly, Qin Yuru appeared in front of old grandma, and said that she did not want to destroy the sisterhood for Qi Tianyu, and was willing to give up this marriage. Old grandma saw that one of the sisters wanted to give up this marriage, and the other wanted this marriage. Thinking that the two families were originally on good terms, she agreed. Today was supposed to be the day of Qin Yuru's marriage, but now because of Madame D's bewitchment, it would be Qin Wanru who got on the bridal sedan chair. Madame D also repeatedly said that she would hide the matter of her younger sister marrying Qi Tianyu, saying that she wanted to give Qi Tianyu a surprise in the bridal room. A surprise? In this life, she had to give these people a big surprise. Miss, don't worry, everything has been arranged according to what you said. Hearing the question, Qin Yu hurriedly answered. Everything had been arranged by her yesterday, one after another, interlocking with each other. She was just waiting for the current situation to be solved. Chapter 2. Yes, several times. They said that if you don't get up, old grandma will come to scold you. Qin Yu reported. Before Qin Wanru went to bed yesterday, she had told her that before she woke up, old grandma would come to urge her to get up. In her previous life, she didn't know that Qi Tianyu had already known about it. He thought that she had ruined his marriage. After his hatred, he pretended that he didn't know about it. He carried her to the bridal sedan chair and lifted her veil in public at the entrance of Qi's mansion. He pushed her down under the sedan chair and scolded her for being vicious and foolish. In her previous life, her reputation was ruined at a young age and she became the biggest joke in Jiangzhou. Her long eyelashes suppressed the redness and hostility in her eyes. When she looked up again, she had a coldness that was different from her age. She turned over and sat up with her feet hanging under the bed. Is the bridal sedan chair coming soon? It should be soon. I heard someone say that it's almost time. Qin Yu squatted down and answered while helping Qin Wanru put on her shoes. They should be ready, right? Qin Wanru stood up and asked. Don't worry, Mississippi. Just now, Brother Fengzi secretly asked someone to tell me that he is ready and waiting for the bridal sedan chair to arrive. Qin Yu also stood up and looked at Qin Wanru excitedly with sparkling eyes. She felt that Qin Wanru seemed to be different since yesterday, but she was happy to see and hear this difference. Qin Wanru became smart. Not only did she save Nanny Yu from the laundry room, but she also recognized the true colors of Madam and Elder Mississippi. She made a series of arrangements. Wang Feng was Nanny Yu's son. Smashing the bridal sedan chair was the key that Qin Wanru arranged to ignite all the following events. Qin Wanru wanted to uproot the humiliation that Qin Yuru and Qi Tianyu imposed on her in her previous life before she grew up. She also wanted people to know that it was Qin Yuru who didn't want to get married, so she pushed the blame to her and she didn't want to get married either. Invite grandma again, Qin Wanru said. Since it was almost time, Qin Yuru wouldn't be able to sit still if she didn't go out to dress up. She would definitely send someone to urge her. Yes, should I help you change your clothes first? Qin Yu blinked and reminded Qin Wanru. No, you go to ask grandma to come here first. Qin Wanru shook her head. Under her long and curly eyelashes, her watery eyes were cold. She was only wearing a set of white undergarments. It was obvious that she had just gotten up. This made it seem more believable that she had just woken up and hadn't had time to do anything. Qin Yu accepted the order and left in a hurry. Qin Wanru walked to the dressing table alone. The girl on the dressing table was still a childish child. Her body was not fully developed yet and her face was as white as snow. Her lips were bright red. Even though she was just a child, it could be seen that she would be extremely beautiful in the future. It was just that it was a little too colorful. The son of the magistrate of Jiangzhou was marrying the daughter of Ningyuan army general. Such a happy event was naturally a big event that excited the whole Jiangzhou, especially at the gate of Ningyuan army general's mansion. A sea of people surrounded the gate of Ningyuan army general's mansion to watch this grand event. The empty bridal sedan chair was carried by Qi Tianyu all the way from the magistrate's mansion. The wedding procession arrived at the gate of Ningyuan army general's mansion with loud drums and music. Qi Tianyu turned over and jumped off the horse. When he was about to pick up the corner of his robe and stride inside, suddenly, a few people holding brooms and sticks rushed out from both sides of the crowd and pounced on the bridal sedan chair without saying a word. Everyone was stunned and couldn't react for a moment. Some people thought that this was a new rule for the bridegroom, but when they saw these people smashing the bridal sedan chair with all their might, and in just a few hits, they actually broke the railing of the sedan chair and kicked the sedan chair to the ground. Only then did they realize that something was wrong. Chapter 3. Hearing Qi Tianyu's words, someone immediately came to stop the people who were smashing the bridal sedan chair. Our first miss doesn't want to get married, so she wants to push the marriage to our second Mississippi. Our second miss doesn't want to get married either, so why did she bring the bridal sedan chair here? Someone among the people who smashed the bridal sedan chair shouted. That's right, our first miss will never get married, and our second miss will never marry for our first Mississippi. First young master of the Qi family, you'd better give up. Another person shouted. Smash the bridal sedan chair, and our first miss doesn't have to get married. This time, the shout was even louder. Qi Tianyu's face turned green with anger. He grabbed a man who was pushed over with a big broom in his hand and said angrily, "Your second miss also doesn't want to get married? What does she think this is? If she wants to get married, she can get married, and if she doesn't want to get married, she won't get married." The man with the broom was Nanny Yu's son, Wang Feng. He glanced at Qi Tianyu and sneered loudly, "First young master of the Qi family, what are you talking about? It's our first miss who is engaged to you, so why are you blaming our second miss? First young master of the Qi family, don't you know who is getting married to you today?" Then, he pushed Qi Tianyu away and waved his hand at the people who were in front of him. All of them retreated and immediately disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind the overturned bridal sedan chair with several broken railings. The red silk on the bridal sedan chair was also torn and scattered on the ground in a mess. "Qin Wanru, you, what are you doing?" Qi Tianyu gnashed his teeth in anger. He was sure that it was Qin Wanru who was making trouble again. At this time, he couldn't care less about the bridal sedan chair and walked into Ningyuan army general's mansion. He wanted to see how thick-skinned this person was to dare to do such a thing. Not far from the entrance of the Ningyuan army general's mansion, there was a tall building. In front of the window on the second floor, a beautiful young man in a purple robe was leaning. He was handsome and delicate, but his lips and face were a little pale, which made him look more elegant and sickly. Even so, He was peerless, which made people's hearts beat faster at first glance. At this time, he leaned against the window, squinted his beautiful eyes, and looked at the noisy scene below. He suddenly raised the corner of his mouth and seemed to be in a good mood. "Master, can we go back now? The wind is too strong here." The guard behind him looked at the window of the gate and asked cautiously. "This king is not someone who can be blown away by the wind. What is there to be afraid of?" The man faintly smiled, revealing a bit of elegance and gentleness, but his words were not gentle at all. "But I can't be exposed to the wind for too long. If my body gets hurt, then..." The guard said uneasily. "Forget it, there's nothing more to see. Let's go." A tinge of boredom and pity appeared on his handsome face. The pale and handsome young man slowly turned around and walked out. His lips curled into a playful smile. This was the first time he heard that the bridal sedan chair was smashed. It seemed that this trip to Jiangzhou was not that boring after all. It was because he was bored that he purposely asked for this least taboo task. After Qin Wanru waited for a while, Qin Yu came back breathlessly. "Is Grandma here now?" Qin Wanru said calmly, pursing her red lips. "Old Grandma is on her way here after hearing that Miss is in trouble." Qin Yu took a deep breath and said in a low voice. "She specially came back to report the news." "Then let's hurry up." Chapter 4. Why are you still going to see old Grandma at this time? "Second miss, you'd better dress up first. Don't be late for the sedan chair." Suddenly, an old maid came in. It was Nanny Fong. She picked up a red wedding dress and showed it to Qin Wanru. She coaxed, "Second miss, look, this is the wedding dress that first miss prepared for you. It's so beautiful. Try it on." Qin Wanru sneered in her heart as she looked at Nanny Fong, who was trying to coax her into wearing the wedding dress. "Second miss, what's wrong with you?" Nanny Fong stuttered as she was frightened by Qin Wanru's cold eyes. The second miss, who had always been ignorant, seemed to have a bloodthirsty look in her eyes at this moment. When Nanny Fong looked into her beautiful eyes, she felt as if her heart was being seen through. "Qin Yu, hurry up," Qin Wanru ordered coldly, ignoring Nanny Fong. Qin Yu hurried over and picked up the comb beside the dressing table. She quickly combed Qin Wanru's hair into a double-ringed bun that was suitable for her age. "Second miss, what are you doing now? Old Grandma will be angry," Nanny Fong said uneasily. She felt that Qin Wanru seemed to be a different person today. The teacup was beside her hand. Qin Wanru's cold eyes swept across Nanny Fong, who was full of ulterior motives. She grabbed the teacup and threw it at her. Nanny Fong dodged subconsciously. The teacup fell at her feet and the whole room became quiet. "Bring me a pair of scissors." Qin Wanru pointed at the wedding dress on the table and said coldly. "This." Nanny Fong opened her mouth and only said one word. When Qin Wanru glanced at her, she couldn't help but avoid her eyes. Qin Yu obediently took a pair of scissors from the desk by the window. Qin Wanru took it, stood up, and walked to the front of the box with the wedding dress. She reached out to pick up Qin Yuru's wedding dress and cut it hard with the scissors in her hand. Immediately, there was a big hole in the exquisite wedding dress, and it looked like Qin Wanru was going to cut it down. Qin Yu was stunned for a moment, but she immediately understood and helped Qin Wanru to tear the wedding dress. "Second miss." Granny Fong was shocked and rushed over. She reached out to grab her hand, wanting to take away her scissors. If the wedding dress was torn, second young miss wouldn't be able to wear the wedding dress and get married. The plan to frame second young miss would fail and eldest young miss wouldn't be able to safely break off the engagement. Madam and eldest young miss would tear her apart. She did not know that the bridal sedan chair had been smashed outside. Seeing Nanny Fong rushing over to grab her scissors, Qin Wanru sneered. She slightly tilted the scissors in her hand, following Nanny Fong's gesture, and fiercely pricked her arm. Blood immediately gushed out. Grandma Fong was so frightened that her eyes widened and her hands and feet spasmed. How could she still stand? She knelt on the ground with a plop. Chapter 5. Miss! Qin Yu screamed and rushed to Qin Wanru. A large group of people appeared at the door. Many servant girls and old maids surrounded an old grandma. Seeing Qin Wanru lying in a pool of blood, the old grandma's face changed and she shouted anxiously, "Quick, call a doctor." A servant girl hurried to call a doctor. Shuozhuo, what happened? Old Grandma Qin rushed to hold Qin Wanru, who was barely breathing, and she was so anxious that she was about to cry. Shuozhuo was her nickname, but only old Grandma Qin called her so intimately in the mansion. Grandma, big sister wants me to marry brother Qi, but I don't want to. Big sister doesn't agree. I don't want to marry, don't let big sister kill me. Qin Wanru struggled to finish her words, and then she loosened her hands and fainted. She had quarreled with old grandma in order to get Qin Yuru's marriage. This time, if she didn't treat her harshly, Madame D and her daughter would not let it go. Moreover, not only old grandma, but also Qi Tianyu. Qi Tianyu would definitely come to the door to question her. Shuozhuo, wake up, Shuozhuo. Seeing that Qin Wanru fainted, old Madame Qin's anxious voice also changed. The face of the little person in her arms was pale without a trace of blood, and there was a pool of blood under her body, which made her look like a broken porcelain doll. Quick, go and see if the doctor is here. Another few maids scrambled to be the first to run out. Qin Wanru was awakened by a buzzing sound. It seemed that someone was talking loudly in her ears, sometimes far and sometimes near, and gradually the voice became clear. And it became clearer and clearer, and the man's voice was with clear anger and disgust. Old Grandma Qin, I don't know what the second miss of your mansion is doing. First, she insisted on marrying me, and then she asked people to smash the bridal sedan chair. Anyway, I don't want to marry the second miss of your mansion, so I won't accept this marriage, and I won't marry her. If she wants to marry, she can marry my second brother. She slowly opened her eyes, looked around, and found no one around her. This place was not her boudoir, but her grandmother's inner room, and the angry voice just now came from outside. It was Qi Tianyu's voice. Sure enough, Qin Yuru had already secretly told Qi Tianyu that she was going to marry on behalf of her elder sister. However, Qi Tianyu did not expose it because he was waiting to take the bridal sedan back to Qi's mansion and humiliate her at the gate of Qi's mansion. He would also break off the engagement in front of everyone, which would make her even more embarrassed and shameful, and also ruin her reputation. The corners of his lips curled into a silent sneer. He stretched out a hand with difficulty and grabbed the edge of the bed. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain as he slowly got up. She was originally a delicate and childish girl, but at this moment, there was a hint of ruthlessness in her. No matter how painful the wounds on his body were, they couldn't compare to the pain in his heart. She had been reborn, so she would no longer be deceived by those people. She wanted to expose Qin Yuru's mask. She wanted to break off the engagement by herself, not Qi Tianyu. First young master of the Qi family, in order not to marry Shuozhuo, you plan to kill her and collude with her old maid to kill her? Old Madame Qin's voice was full of anger. She slammed her hand on the table and said harshly. How could old Madame Qin not be angry when she thought of her favorite granddaughter in the room? As for the bridal sedan being smashed, it was a trivial matter now. The words that Qin Wanru said before she fainted were like a thorn in her heart. But at that time, she was busy asking the doctor to treat Qin Wanru's injury and did not have time to care about it. Now that Qin Wanru was taken care of and her life was not in danger, she was relieved. When she was about to interrogate Nanny Fong, Qi Tianyu came, so she directly vented her anger on Qi Tianyu. Qi Tianyu brought a lot of people with him. He originally wanted to humiliate Qin Wanru, so he specially invited a lot of clansmen to escort the bride. When he rushed into the door in anger, these clansmen naturally followed him in. Qi Tianyu did not want to believe that the old maid killed Qin Wanru. It was obviously a trap that Qin Wanru came up with, so it must be fake. He did not know what she wanted to do. Want to kill her? Qi Tianyu repeated with a gloomy face. His eyes fell on Qin Yuru, who was sitting on the side with grievance and secretly wiping her tears with a handkerchief. His heart ached and he immediately said sharply, "Old madam, did your granddaughter know that I don't want to marry her, so she came up with this unreasonable reason to make me marry her?" Unreasonable reason? First young master of the Qi family, you really think highly of me. Qin Wanru's voice was a little weak, but it sounded stubbornly in everyone's ears. Hearing her voice, everyone looked up in shock and saw a little girl holding a corner of the screen, struggling to stand there. Her lips were as white as snow, and her eyes were black as ink. Her arm was wrapped with thick white gauze, but even so, there was still blood seeping from it. It could be seen that she was seriously injured. Didn't she say she was pretending? It was obvious that she was seriously injured. The clansmen of the Qi family who accompanied Qi Tianyu to break off the engagement could not help but be surprised. Chapter 6. I want to break off the engagement. I didn't want this marriage. Big sister coaxed me into marrying him, but I don't know why she asked Nanny Fang to stab me when I didn't want to marry him. Is she trying to force me to marry him? Hiding the coldness in her eyes, Qin Wanru pushed Qin Yuru's hand away and fell into Qin Yu's arms. Qin Yuru looked at Qin Yuru with caution on her pale face. Qin Yuru's words made everyone's faces change. But at her age, when she wanted to say it, it made people feel that it was real. Immediately, everyone turned to look at Qin Yuru. Second sister, what did you say? Qin Yuru took a step back and her face changed. She pointed at Qin Wanru with a trembling finger. She was really panicking. Wanru, what are you talking about? You were the one who took Yuru away from this marriage. How did it become your big sister forcing you to marry him? As for the stab, it was just an accident. You're still the same. You can't be taught well. You just push the blame to your big sister when something happens. Sitting next to old grandma, First Madam Qin's face darkened. She stood next to her eldest daughter and scolded her. In fact, Madam Qin was not her biological mother. Qin Wanru was just fostered under her name. But she didn't know this at this time in her previous life. How could I not want to marry? Brother Tianyu and I. Qin Yuru's eyes turned red. She pinched her handkerchief and said with grievance. Qi Tianyu's heart ached when he saw this. As for Qin Wanru saying that Qin Yuru didn't want to marry him, he would never believe it. They were childhood sweethearts. Qin Yuru knew that she was going to marry him, so she was very affectionate towards him. They had been in touch with each other secretly and had given each other a lot of gifts in private. 10 days ago, my maternal family sent a letter to ask for my big sister's hand in marriage. My cousin, the heir of Duke Yong, asked to marry my big sister. Did you refuse, mother? Qin Wanru held Qin Yu's hand tightly and said word by word. She threw out the most serious words with a sneer. His earth-shattering words shocked everyone present. The old mistress did not know about this either. She frowned and felt a tightness in her chest. After all, Qi Tianyu was not stupid. After being stunned for a moment, he suddenly turned his head and stared at Qin Wanru in astonishment. He asked harshly, "Is it true?" Originally, he also thought that Qin Wanru's words were nonsense. How could Qin Yuru be unwilling to marry him? Just last night when they met, she cried and fell into his arms. She repeatedly expressed that it was not that she did not want to marry him, but that Qin Wanru must marry him. Moreover, Qin Wanru was favored by old grandma, so she had no choice. She said that in order to be with him, she even jumped into the river, but she did not die and was rescued. After that, she fell ill and was guarded. It was not until last night that she deceived the old maid guarding her and secretly ran out to see him. What Qi Tianyu said sounded sincere, but if the heir of Duke Yong in the capital city really wanted to marry her, how could it be true? After all, Qi Tianyu was a Juren, so he could figure it out after thinking about it for a while. I don't know about this. Qin Yuru's face turned pale and she took a step back in panic. But she reacted quickly and immediately lowered her head to cover her eyes with a handkerchief. She cried and said, "This kind of thing, how would I know?" She was also secretly angry. How did Qin Wanru know about this? There were only a few people who knew about this. How did she know? Who was it that leaked the news? But she did not dare to directly deny that she was indeed going to be engaged to Duke Yong's mansion. So is it true or not? Qi Tianyu clenched his fists tightly and stared at Qin Yuru fiercely. Big sister doesn't know? Mother, don't you know? Mother, do you dare to say that there is no such thing? Do you dare to say that big sister will never be engaged to cousin? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and looked fearlessly at first Madame Qin, Madame D. How could Madame D dare to say this? When the marriage was settled, everyone would know. Even if she wanted to hide it, she could not. I didn't know there was a letter from the capital city. How did you know? Don't tell me you want to make trouble and hurt Yuru again. Madame D did not dare to answer directly. She rolled her eyes and countered Qin Wanru. Anyway, the letter could not be obtained by others. Brother Qi, you don't believe me. Qin Yuru had always been very cooperative with Madame D. At this moment, she raised her eyes and looked at Qi Tianyu with tears in her eyes. She cried pitifully and turned to leave. What happened today was too unexpected. First, Qin Wanru was stabbed by Nanny Fong. Now, Qin Wanru talked about her relationship with Di Yan. Although her mother had smoothed things over, she still felt inexplicably panicked. She wanted to take this opportunity to leave. The letter was actually in her room. She was worried and wanted to check it out. Seeing his sweetheart being so pitiful, the anger on Qi Tianyu's face slowly faded. Guilt appeared in his eyes. Sister Yuru, I will definitely break off the engagement. I will never marry such an arrogant and vicious woman who has an affair with my second brother. In his dream, such a simple sentence had ruined his reputation. Even though he had entered the capital city, he still ended up taking the blame for someone else and being cut in half by the Golden Gate. First young master of the Qi family, please remember that you are a Juren. Whatever you say must have a basis. Don't take your nonsense as the truth. What you see is just what others want you to see. Qin Wanru said coldly. Although her weak body was trembling, her voice was extremely cold. His eyes slowly swept over the people who came with Qi Tianyu, and his lips curved into a sneer. Today, Qi Tianyu deliberately came to ruin his reputation, so he brought a lot of people with him. He wanted these people to be his witnesses. But now, he was not the only one who could be the witness. Come with me, I will show you what the evidence is. The young girl's cold eyes swept over everyone's faces and finally fell on Qi Tianyu's face. She smiled disdainfully. Her lips were pale and there was not a trace of blood in them. Her eyes were so sharp that it made people feel sorry for her. Wanru, what nonsense are you talking about? Madame D was furious and walked over to grab Qin Wanru. Grandma, please ask mother to step aside. Qin Wanru slightly stepped back to avoid Madame D's hand. She looked up at old Grandma Qin and said. Only old Grandma Qin could control Madame D here. Looking at Qin Wanru who was biting her lips and the blood on her arm, old Grandma Qin felt a pain in her heart. Old Madame Qin felt a pain in her heart. She sighed and gestured to an old maid beside her. The old maid came over and pulled Madame D aside. She advised in a euphemistic way, since second miss is framed by Qi's mansion, first madam should give second miss a chance to refute. Justice is in our hearts. Chapter 7. The backyard of Ningyuan Army General's mansion was not big. Before long, Qin Wanru led everyone to the door of Qin Yuru's yard. Seeing that Qin Wanru was about to enter her main room, Qin Yuru was anxious. She didn't care if it would attract attention. She took 2 steps forward and reached out to stop Qin Wanru. Second sister, what do you want? She was so anxious that her face turned pale. She stared at Qin Wanru with hatred. Nothing, I just want to read the letter that cousin wrote to big sister. Qin Wanru stood still and looked at Qin Yuru coldly. Letter, where did the letter come from? Qin Yuru was so flustered that she almost bit her tongue. She didn't know how Qin Wanru knew about this. As early as when Madame D intended to let her marry into Duke Yong's mansion, she and Di Yan had been in love with each other. From time to time, they would write letters to each other in private. This time, Duke Yong's mansion could agree to this marriage because Di Yan repeatedly begged Countess Yong. Big sister, do you dare to let me go in and look for it? Qin Wanru asked. How dare you? Your big sister's room is not for anyone to look at. Madame D shouted angrily. Then let Grandma send someone in to look for it, okay? Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered as she spoke calmly. Her calm expression made Qin Yuru panic even more. She turned to look at Madame D for help and said, Mother, look at my sister. Is she crazy? How could she want to ruin my reputation? Ruin your reputation? Just let Grandma's people look for it, and you want to ruin your reputation? Big sister is so cautious. What on earth are you afraid of finding? Qin Wanru sneered and quickly caught her words. Everyone looked at Madame D and Qin Yuru suspiciously. Looking at their panicked faces, could it be true? Grandma, let someone in to find big sister's dressing table. It is in the bottom drawer on the right side. There is a rosewood box there, and it is inside. In the letter that cousin wrote to big sister recently, he must have mentioned this marriage. Qin Wanru's eyes were cold and calm. This sentence caused everyone to be shocked. He actually said it in such detail. Was this true? If this was true, then the truth was not what everyone had imagined. It was not that the second Miss Qin was arrogant and rude to steal her elder sister's marriage. It was clear that the first Miss Qin disliked the son of the magistrate and wanted to go to the capital city to marry into a rich family. Therefore, she coaxed her naive younger sister and stole this so-called good marriage. If this was really the case, this first Miss Qin was not only dissolute, but also very vicious. She clearly wanted to destroy her own sister. Looking at second Miss Qin's immature appearance, she looked like a child no matter how one looked at her. Did she really know anything about love? Qi Tianyu's eyes turned cold. This matter was full of twists and turns, and the accident in the accident made him calm down. Thinking about it carefully, he felt Qin Yuru was more and more suspicious. His eyes involuntarily fell on Qin Wanru's pale but stubborn face. She was still a child. Madame Dowager nodded and called 2 old maids to go into the room. Qin Yuru still wanted to stop them, but she was stopped by one of the old maids. The other old maid went straight into the room and took out a rosewood box after a while. The people accompanying them couldn't help but whisper to each other. Seeing this box, Qin Yuru no longer cared about the old maid who stopped her. She pushed the old maid away and suddenly rushed over. She grabbed the rosewood box from the old maid's hand and held it in her arms. Then she turned around and ran into the room. Unexpectedly, the door was closed with a bang. Everyone was stunned, and then their faces changed. Yuru, don't take it too hard. Your sister didn't mean to humiliate you. She is still young and her words are not accurate. Don't take it too hard. Madame D reacted the fastest. She immediately pushed away the 2 old maids who held her before and rushed to the door. She knocked on the door and cried loudly, as if Qin Yuru really wanted to commit suicide because of Qin Wanru's humiliation. Mother, second sister and grandmother don't believe me and even took out the things in my boudoir. This makes me feel ashamed to stand in the world. Qin Yuru in the room also came to her senses at this time. She hurriedly followed Madame D's words and cried loudly inside. Of course, the letter could not be seen by others. She also said this deliberately, meaning that old grandma was partial to Qin Wanru and deliberately took out the things in her room in front of so many people to humiliate her. Hearing this, Madame D also breathed a sigh of relief outside the room, and a trace of pride flashed in her eyes. What Madame D said meant that neither Qin Wanru nor old grandma could force Yuru. Otherwise, no one could bear the responsibility if Yuru died. Old grandma could not bear the responsibility of forcing her granddaughter to die. First young master of the Qi family, I don't need to say anything about what will happen next. Qin Wanru took a step back and looked sideways at Qi Tianyu, who was stunned and could not react for a moment, with a little sarcasm. That childish, mocking gaze fell on Qi Tianyu's body. Then, it slowly moved away, causing Qi Tianyu's slightly sluggish gaze to fall on the green headscarf of a person beside him. Green headscarf, green hat. Understanding the meaning of Qin Wanru's sarcasm, the green headscarf was like a sharp knife that stabbed Qi Tianyu's arrogant self-esteem, and also pierced the balance that he maintained. Qi Tianyu's face turned pale and his eyes turned red. He clenched his fists and strode to the door of Qin Yuru's room. Chapter 8. In the room, Qin Yuru was so scared that she knelt on the ground and watched Qi Tianyu break the door. She was trembling and looked delicate and pitiful. In the past, Qi Tianyu would feel sorry for Qin Yuru when he saw her like this. But now, there was only violence in his eyes. He snatched the sandalwood box from Qin Yuru's hand, opened it, and took out a letter from it. Although he only took a few glances at it, he knew that everything Qin Wanru said was true. Well, our Qi's mansion doesn't deserve you. Since we don't deserve you, you can just break off the engagement. Qi Tianyu sneered, and his eyes were as cold as a knife. He couldn't wait to cut Qin Yuru, who still looked delicate and gentle, into pieces. Brother Tianyu, it's not what you think. Qin Yuru panicked and hugged Qi Tianyu's leg while crying. Qi Tianyu kicked Qin Yuru away. He was so angry that his face turned from white to green. He thought that he had devoted himself to marrying Qin Yuru for so many years and did not even have a personal maid. In the end, he was just a backup for Qin Yuru. He clearly saw the meaning of the letter. It was obvious that there had been an ambiguous relationship between the two, and the heir of Duke Yong in the capital city also laughed at him for being a toad lusting for swan meat, which made him almost lose his mind. You let the young second miss take the place of your marriage, and also came to my mansion to tell me that the second miss must snatch your marriage, so that you will be unhappy for the rest of your life. Aren't you happy? You and your cousin have been secretly planning to make me a cuckold. At this time, Qi Tianyu wanted to tear Qin Yuru into pieces. After that, he tore the letter in his hand into two and threw it on Qin Yuru's face. Since you and your cousin have been together for a long time, you should break off the engagement. Why do you have to hurt your sister? After saying this, he turned and strode away. At this time, he was so angry that he said what he wanted to say. He loved Qin Yuru as much as he liked her before. As a Jurin, he knew what hurt the most at this time. Although the people outside the room did not see the letter in Qi Tianyu's hand, they clearly heard the movement inside and looked at each other. It turned out that not only did they have an affair, but this Miss Qin was also pregnant. This news was too shocking. Seeing that Qi Tianyu left, everyone followed him out at the same time. After such a thing happened, the marriage between the two families had to be cancelled even if it didn't happen. Originally, they thought that smashing the bridal sedan chair was a big deal, but they didn't expect that there was a bigger thing behind. The news that the first Miss Qin got pregnant before marriage was even more shocking. In the room, Qin Yuru could not bear the sudden change and fainted. Outside the room, Madame D almost fainted, but she still had a little sense. She hurriedly turned to old grandma and cried for help. Old grandma, please ask someone to stop the first young master of the Qi family. If this is spread, Yuru will be killed. Is that true? Old grandma's body swayed and her face was as pale as snow. She looked at Madame D in a daze and was also heartbroken. Although she did not like Qin Yuru, she was old grandma's granddaughter after all. Mother, it's not like that. Yuru didn't do it. It's young Master Qi who framed Yuru. How could he say that? Madame D was also at a loss at this time. She knelt on the ground and cried loudly. It's a sin, it's really a sin. Old grandma's body went limp and she almost fell. Qin Wanru quickly reached out to hold her, and then calmly said to the crying Madame D, Mother, you should ask someone to stop young Master Qi yourself. I'll help grandma back. After saying that, she ignored Madame D and slowly walked back with old grandma's servant girl. After a few steps, she subconsciously turned her head and saw a pair of charming eyes. Her hands involuntarily trembled, and she forced herself to stagger and almost fell. Chapter 9. The two families broke off the engagement. The eldest daughter of Ningyuan army general was unfaithful and vicious. Not only did she marry someone else, but she also schemed to let her sister take her place. The news spread like a rolling snowball. In less than half a day, the news almost spread throughout Jiangzhou city. For a moment, everyone despised the first Miss Qin. Some busybodies even made up a joke and sang it outside. Later, when Qin Huayong heard the news, he immediately sent people to suppress it. But because of Magistrate Qi's secret obstruction, the suppression was not thorough. The news had already spread like wildfire. Far away from Jiangzhou Prefecture, Ningyuan Army General's mansion was also in chaos. Qin Yuru cried and made a scene, and even tried to commit suicide, turning the mansion upside down. In contrast, Qin Wanru was quiet in Madame Dowager's yard. But Qin Wanru's heart was not at peace. At this time, she was not concerned about Qin Yuru. Sitting in front of Madame Dowager's bed, she frowned slightly. Did she see it wrong at that time? Was it really that person? In her dream, she only glanced at him from afar. But at that time, his eyes seemed to meet her eyes in the same way. But how could he be here? With his identity, shouldn't he be far away in the capital city, half imprisoned at this time? In her dream, she did not remember seeing him in her mansion. Miss, there is a guard coming to ask you to go over, but I have not seen this person. Qin Yu came in quietly and reported. Taking a deep breath, she suppressed the horror in her heart and raised her slightly pale little face. Where is he? Just outside the door. Qin Yu answered. Let's go and have a look. Qin Wanru tucked Madame Dowager in the quilt, stood up and turned to go out. There was indeed a guard outside the door, a young guard of about 17 or 18 years old. He stood at the door with a smile. Seeing Qin Wanru coming over, he smiled and said, Second Miss Qin, our master wants to see you. Who is your master? Qin Wanru took a deep breath and asked. Her slightly clenched fist was a little trembling. Second Miss, you will know when you get there. The guard said with a smile. He pointed to the right and said, Our master lives in the Lanxiang Pavilion in the mansion. Second Miss, you don't need to be wary of our master. It was Ningyuan Army General who invited our master to live here. But Second Miss, please keep it a secret from others. After saying that, he stood to the side and pretended to wait patiently. This meant that he had to go even if he didn't want to. He seemed to be polite, but he was actually overbearing. Moreover, they were in her own mansion, so Qin Wanru couldn't find any reason to refuse. Touching her injured arm, Qin Wanru could only nod. Lanxiang Pavilion was on the right side of Qin Yuru's courtyard. It was the place closest to the corner of the backyard and had always been empty. Because it was in a corner, few people went there, so no one noticed that someone had moved into Lanxiang Pavilion these days. However, even though they were in the same residence, she did not know anything about it. This meant that her father had purposely concealed this matter. However, this matter had nothing to do with him. Why was this person looking for him? Although he was anxious, he still followed the others to the Orchid Fragrance Pavilion. The guard went in to report while she stood guard outside the door. After a while, she saw the guard come out and respectfully invite her in. However, he rudely stopped Qin Yu. Miss. Qin Yu called her from behind in panic. You stay here. Qin Wanru took a deep breath and calmed her thoughts. Then, she turned around and comforted Qin Yu. On the chair in the middle of the room sat a teenager who was about 14 or 15 years old. The first thing that caught Qin Wanru's eyes was a pair of slanted eyes. His pupils were like broken jades, revealing the charm of both immortals and demons. He wore a purple loose robe with the pattern of a dragon embroidered on the cuffs, which made him look romantic and enchanting. Under the purple jade crown, his hair was tied up. Such an appearance was breathtaking. However, Qin Wanru still felt danger from his fairy-like handsomeness. His eyes were a little too sinister, but it seemed that when he smiled, he immediately made people feel that he was a cool breeze and bright moon. His face was very pale. Not only his complexion, but his lips were also much lighter than ordinary people. There was a kind of sickly beauty. However, because of this, he made people feel that he was more handsome and elegant. He had the charm of a famous scholar in Gujin. When she saw him in her previous life, the teenager had already grown into a young man. However, with such an appearance, even if they were a few years apart, she could still tell at a glance. Chapter 10. When the late emperor was on the throne, Chu Luqian was the crown prince. When the late emperor died, Chu Luqian was only a few months old. When he was still a baby, his uncle took over the throne and abolished his position as the crown prince. Then he became Prince Chen and was half-guarded. Because he lived in the Nangong Palace, some people jokingly called him the Prince of the Nangong Palace. In her previous life, some people said that Prince Chen was as gentle as jade and handsome as an immortal, others said that Prince Chen was cruel, bloodthirsty, and enchanting. But no matter what, Qin Wanru felt that it had nothing to do with her. In her previous life, she only saw him once from a distance. At that time, he became the crown prince again, standing high above the Dan Palace and looking at her like an ant. But now, she had to face this young Prince Chen. If possible, she would definitely stay away from such a person. But at this moment, she had to raise all her spirits and redefine herself. She would never forget that many years later, when Prince Chen was revived, he started with the beauties who were in the palace at that time. On that day, blood flowed like a river in the palace. The beautiful girls who originally had beautiful hopes died under the sky one by one. They faced the sky with their hair messy and their blood made Chushio Palace, where the selection was held, a ghost cave in hell. Then, in order to punish this matter, the palace slightly implicated the palace servants and added a sea of blood to Chushio Palace. It was said that after this incident, most of the palace servants were gone and many palaces were empty. Not to mention the master, not even a servant could be found. And she was also implicated at that time. How could she not be afraid when she saw the Prince of Azura again? The person in front of her could not be offended no matter what. If possible, she should even cling to his leg. But should she cling to him or not? Or how to? Qin Yuru did not know what to do at that moment because she was too shocked. She could only stare at the young man in front of her. Do you know me? Chu Luqian looked Qin Wanru up and down. He was smiling and the evil in his eyes was gone, which made people think that they were dazzled just now. The corners of the sickly beautiful youth's lips curled up slightly. His smile was fresh, as if he was an exquisite immortal who had walked out of an ink painting. It made people feel that any description in front of his beauty paled in comparison. Under his long and curly eyelashes, his jade-like eyes revealed an elegant smile. He looked like a harmless, gentle, and beautiful youth who could topple cities. If she didn't have the memory of her last life, Qin Wanru would think so too. I don't know him, but since he's my father's honored guest, we naturally can't treat him badly. Qin Wanru restrained herself, bowed her head, and said respectfully. She clenched her fists hard and let her fingers plunge into her palms. The tingling made her a little more spirited. She raised her spirits and tried to meet the prince in a peaceful manner. Now, she was just a weak girl in the boudoir and didn't know this Prince Chen. You disturb my rest. Prince Chen was not asking but stating a fact. Qin Wanru's back was covered with a layer of cold sweat. She carefully worded her words and said, Prince, please forgive me. You have to pay the price for disturbing this king. Prince Chen's dark pupils locked onto Qin Wanru, as if he was saying that he did not accidentally see the farce of Qin Wanru going to Qin Yuru's side, but that Qin Wanru deliberately went to Qin Yuru to disturb him. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Qin Wanru didn't insist and lowered her head. She was totally different from Prince Chen. I rarely forgive people. Prince Chen said with a chuckle. Then, how can I forgive you, Your Highness? Well, I need to think about it. At your command, Your Highness. In this case, Qin Wanru naturally didn't dare to negotiate. The power of life and death was in the hands of others. Prince Chen actually talked to her for so long, so he probably didn't want to kill her. As a deposed crown prince, he could finally regain his identity. Such a person would certainly not be a good person. Good. Know your place. Prince Chen clapped his hands and his handsome lips curled up. I heard that the ancestor of Ningyuan army general has a Fenghua glazed cup, which is very outstanding. If you can get that Fenghua glazed cup, your life will be saved. Fenghua glazed cup. Qin Wanru was stunned for a moment. She really knew about this Fenghua glazed cup. It was said that this Fenghua glazed cup was an ancestral object of the Qin family. It had been passed down for a long time and was now in the hands of her grandmother. It was very precious and she had only seen it once. Because she liked it, she remembered it very clearly. That's grandmother's favorite thing. Qin Wanru hesitated and said. What? It's not worth your life. Prince Chen raised his eyebrows and his eyes fell on the top of Qin Wanru's hanging hair with a trace of interest but also a little gloomy. I will definitely find Fenghua glazed cup for you, Your Highness. Qin Wanru gritted her teeth. His interested eyes fell on her, which made her tremble for a while. That kind of eyes really didn't look like a prince who lived a comfortable life, which made her feel inexplicably cold. She even immediately understood the hidden meaning in his words. If she couldn't take out this Fenghua glazed cup, she might not be able to save her life. Even though this Prince Chen seemed to be smiling gently, Qin Wanru didn't dare to doubt the authenticity of his words. If so, then you can go back and get Fenghua glazed cup. Prince Chen waved his hand very elegantly and leaned back, indicating that she could go. Yes. Qin Wanru felt relieved and stood up to leave. This Prince Chen was definitely an accident, but she dared not to ignore it. Hey, the wound on your arm, don't tell me you did it yourself. Although the youth's laughter was as elegant as jade, she could hear the malice in it. However, what was even more malicious was his hand. He actually pressed down on her injured arm and even fiercely pinched it. Blood immediately seeped out from the thin scarf. This bastard. This was the only sentence in Qin Wanru's heart when her consciousness dissipated because of the pain. Isn't this Prince Chen, the noble descendant of the emperor? Didn't he say that he was sometimes gentle and elegant? Although there weren't many times like this, no matter what, this kind of dangerous underbelly seemed to have nothing to do with this kind of childish behavior. Moreover, I look like a child. Your Highness, you. Someone exclaimed, as if he was feeling indignant for her. Chapter 11. When Qin Wanru woke up again, it was already night time. Under the dim light, an old woman lowered her face and picked up a pair of scissors to pick up the lantern. She was her grandmother and the only family member who loved her in this mansion. Her arm seemed to have been bandaged again. Grandma, are you feeling better? She whispered softly, but old Madame Qin seemed to feel it and raised her head. When she saw Qin Wanru open her eyes, she immediately stood up in surprise and walked over to her, saying softly, Zhuozhuo finally woke up. Come on, prepare dinner. Qin Yu came out from behind the screen and hurried to help Qin Wanru up. Then she took a cushion and let her lean behind her. The wound on her arm seemed to have been bandaged again. The blood didn't ooze out and it didn't hurt as much as before. Another servant girl came in and placed a bowl of porridge and some light dishes in front of Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru was really hungry. She picked up the porridge and drank half a bowl before stopping. "Old madam, the general, madam and first miss are here." An old maid came in and reported respectfully. "Why are they here? Let them go and don't come again. Zhuozhua and I can live like this." Old madam's face darkened and she snorted. She didn't believe that Qin Huayong knew nothing about this. "Old madam, the general said that he came to apologize to you and has something to explain to you." The old maid hesitated and said awkwardly. "Grandma, let father come in." Qin Wanru wiped her mouth with a handkerchief and persuaded softly. Her grandmother was old, and her father didn't care, but she cared. In her previous life, her grandmother died early because of her shame and depression. This time, she would not make the same mistake. Not only would she protect herself, but she would also protect her grandmother. Hearing her words, old madam sighed and nodded helplessly. In fact, she also knew that what she said before was out of anger. How could she be so angry with her only son? "Mother, how is Wanru?" Ning Yuan army general was a middle-aged man with a strong look. He came into the room and bowed to old madam, then looked at Qin Wanru and asked gently. Behind him, Madame D and her daughter came in with their heads down. It was obvious that they had cried. Their eyes were red and swollen, looking very pitiful. "How can he get better in this state? You're already injured to this extent. You almost lost your life." Old madam said coldly. She looked at Madame D and snorted. "What do you think we should do now?" "Mother, send Yuru to the capital city." Qin Huayong coughed lightly and said. "Send her to the capital city. Let her marry heir of Duke Yong's mansion." Madame Dowager looked sarcastically at Madame D and her daughter standing beside Qin Huayong. "Are you so sure that Duke Yong's mansion is willing to marry a girl who lost her virginity before marriage?" Madame Qin's words, Yuru immediately. "You mad off, madam." "Mother, Yuru didn't do it. Qi Tianyu is slandering Yuru. How could Yuru be such an ignorant person?" Madame D wiped her tears with a handkerchief angrily and cried. "So you want to go of and of is? Of, madam. Madam." Madame D was speechless. She was dumbfounded. Ning Yuan army general's mansion was in the wrong. How could she go to Qi's mansion to defend herself? "Wanru, can you save your sister?" Madame D was stunned for a moment. She suddenly turned to Qin Wanru and begged. Sure enough, this was directed at her. "Mother, I don't understand what you mean. Isn't it enough? Do you want me to sacrifice my life for big sister?" She raised her head with a pair of tearful eyes and a bit of anger. She reached out to pick up the scissors that old grandma used to light up the lantern and put it on her neck. "If that's what mother wants, then I'll return mother's life." In her previous life, she only found out later that she was not Madame D's biological daughter. She had always treated Madame D as her biological mother, so she never understood why Madame D was so biased. In fact, many people in the mansion knew, but they just hid it from her. "Zhuozhua, put it down. Do you want me to die of heartache?" Seeing Qin Wanru's resolute look, Madame Dowager was so anxious that her face turned pale. She turned around and shouted at Qin Huayong, "If something really happens to Zhuozhua, I don't want to live anymore. I might as well go with this girl to make room for you." Qin Huayong couldn't stand it. Even if he had any other ideas, he didn't dare to bring it up again. He glared at Mrs. Qin and said hurriedly, "Wanru, put down the scissors. What if you scare your grandmother?" Mrs. Qin didn't say anything. "Father, are you also here to persuade me to take responsibility for big sister? You'd better say that I was the one who caused all this." Qin Wanru looked at Qin Huayong calmly as if she had seen through their real intention. Her childish eyes were sad and stubborn. "Wanru, don't worry. You have been wronged. I won't let you be wronged again. Seeing Qin Wanru like this, Qin Huayong felt a pain in his heart and said guiltily. Qin Wanru's words made Madame D and her daughter, who were putting on a show, almost jump up. They had finally persuaded Qin Huayong to come over and persuade Qin Wanru to take the responsibility. As long as Qin Wanru said that she had framed Qin Yuru's reputation would be preserved. However, he didn't expect that Qin Huayong would change his mind after hearing Qin Wanru's words before he made a formal request. Madame D wanted to say something but was glared at by Qin Huayong. Old Madame took the opportunity to grab the scissors from Qin Wanru's hand. Father, how do you want to deal with wet nurse Chen? Qin Wanru allowed old grandma to snatch the scissors from her hand, and then reached out to support old grandma's slightly trembling body. She looked at Qin Huayong calmly, and then her cold eyes fell on wet nurse Chen who was hiding behind Madame D. Chapter 12. Kids shouldn't care so much about this. Qin Huayong frowned and waved his hand when he heard Qin Wanru's words. Kids shouldn't care so much. What about me? Am I getting old? I don't need to care about this. Old grandma interrupted Qin Huayong's words with hatred. Qin Wanru asked Qin Yu to help old grandma to sit on a chair. Mother, this is a little strange. Qin Huayong dared not to be careless when he heard old grandma's angry words. What's strange? Father, do you think a servant's words are more important than your own? Qin Wanru raised her bright eyes and looked at Qin Huayong. Nanny Fang was Madame D's dowry. Qin Wanru wanted to cut off one of Madame D's arms, and she wanted Madame D to do it herself. She wanted to see how many people would be loyal to a master who couldn't protect her confidant. Life was at stake and it was not something that could be explained in a few words. Flog that old woman to death. Before Qin Huayong could speak, old grandma said with a cold face. She had always loved Qin Wanru. This time, Qin Wanru almost died and was pushed into such a terrible situation by Madame D and her daughter. How could she not be angry? What was the point of keeping a servant who harmed her master? Mother, it's a life, and it's an accident. Madame D was Madame D's confidant, so Madame D couldn't bear to let Nanny Fang die. Mother, are you saying that if I die, it's just an accident? Qin Wanru said coldly, her face tense. Only she, Qin Yu, and Nanny Fang were present at that time, so it was useless for Nanny Fang to defend herself. Madame D was at a loss for words. She looked at Qin Wanru, who was sitting on the bed, and felt that the Qin Wanru in front of her seemed to be a different person. In the past, Qin Wanru would never say such words to her. If she coaxed her a little, she would definitely be obedient to her. Second sister, how can you speak to mother like this? Qin Yuru stopped crying and reprimanded Qin Wanru on behalf of Mrs. Qin. Grandmother, since Nanny Fang doesn't want to admit it, let's send her to the government office and let them investigate what's going on and why someone would want to harm me. Even if I don't want to accept a marriage that was cheated, I can't die. Qin Wanru leaned back and ignored Qin Yuru's words. Her eyes were calm, as if she had known that Qin Yuru would say this. Send them to the authorities. Not only did Madame D and her daughter's hearts tremble, even Qin Huayong's heart was in his throat. This matter was now in a big mess. He went to Magistrate Chi's side and apologized a lot. He also gave a lot of guarantees. Magistrate Chi finally relented and no longer pursued this matter. It could be considered as a muddle-headed annulment of the marriage. He only said that the two families were incompatible. However, if this matter was taken to the court and it became a big deal, his official career would be hindered. How could Qin Huayong, who had always wanted to spread his wings, be willing? Get rid of that old maid. Qin Huayong said to Mrs. Qin. General. Mrs. Qin was shocked. Mother, you can't bear to do it. Well, mother must be reluctant to deal with an old maid who is part of the dowry. Maybe I have wronged her. It's better to send her to the authorities. Qin Wanru looked up and said calmly. Send her to the authorities, now. Our mansion will not wrong an old maid. Old grandma sneered and echoed Qin Wanru. She was about to call someone over. Get rid of her now. Seeing that old grandma was going to take it seriously, Qin Huayong was so anxious that he kicked Mrs. Qin and said sternly. Although this kick was not heavy, it woke Mrs. Qin up. She immediately nodded and said, I will punish this evil servant who hurt the master immediately. After saying this, she shouted to the old maids behind her, drag her out and beat her to death. The old maids behind her looked at Qin Wanru with vague and frightened eyes. Then they dragged wet Nurse Chen, who was struggling with all her might, out of the room. On the bed, a sarcastic smile flashed across Qin Wanru's lips. These people should also be Madame D's people. Let's see if they still dare to follow Madame D to the end. You can go back. Old grandma was silent for a moment and waved her hand. Mother, but Yuru, what should we do? Mrs. Qin and Qin Yuru cried again with red eyes. I don't know what you and your husband are thinking. This should not have happened. Old grandma said tiredly. She felt disheartened. She was kept in the dark about such a big thing. It could be seen that the couple treated her as an outsider. They only hid it from her and Zhuozhuo. Old grandma also felt disheartened. She was only Qin Huayong's legal mother, not his biological mother. Qin Huayong's biological mother died early. It was old grandma who raised him. When he was young, he was close to his legal mother. After he married Mrs. Qin, they were not so close. However, what happened today really disappointed the old madam. After saying that, she closed her eyes. Seeing old grandma like this, Qin Huayong also knew that he was in the wrong. He looked at his little daughter and sighed helplessly. Then he left old grandma's yard with Mrs. Qin and her daughter, who were still crying. Grandma, you really don't care about big sister's matter? After they left, Qin Wanru got up from the bed and walked behind old grandma. She gently rubbed old grandma's forehead and asked softly. I'm old and I can't care about them. Your father is too ambitious now. He doesn't care about what I think. Old grandma said tiredly and angrily. Chapter 13. Aunt Shui was actually Qin Huayong's cousin, Shui Rulan. She was the daughter of old Madame Qin's younger sister. Because old Madame Qin's younger sister died early, she was raised by old Madame Qin at a very young age. Later, she got married, but her husband died soon after. She didn't give birth to a son or daughter, so old Madame Qin brought her back and now she lived in Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Shui Rulan was a gentle woman. Even if she was in a bad situation, she didn't blame anyone. Qin Huayong had been very affectionate to this cousin since he was a child. However, both of them had been engaged since childhood, so he had always been polite to her and didn't have any intention of jumping the line. Later, Shui Rulan came back and lived in peace with Qin Huayong. Even though they lived in the same mansion, they seldom met each other. When they had to meet each other, there were always others around. Unexpectedly, 10 days ago, when Qin Huayong was drunk, he accidentally entered Shui Rulan's room at night and slept on her bed. What was more coincidental was that when he fell on the bed with Shui Rulan, who was struggling desperately in his arms, Madame D suddenly broke in. When she saw the scene in front of her, she was so sad that she burst into tears on the spot. After Qin Huayong woke up, he felt guilty for Madame D and Shui Rulan. He didn't know how to solve the problem in front of him. After the incident, Qin Huayong wanted to marry Shui Rulan, but Shui Rulan couldn't get over it and almost pulled her hair out to be a sister-in-law. Old grandma persuaded her again and again. Finally, Shui Rulan decided to live in the small Buddha hall for a period of time, saying that she wanted to calm down. In the previous life, because of old grandma's health, Shui Rulan finally became Qin Huayong's concubine. Because she inexplicably became Qin Huayong's concubine, she had been depressed. Later, she gave birth prematurely when she was 7 months pregnant, and 2 babies died. Later, Qin Wanru knew that it was actually Madame D's plot, and even the premature birth was secretly done by Madame D. She didn't think of what happened 10 days ago before, but now she was very clear. 10 days ago, wasn't it when Marquis Yong's mansion sent the marriage proposal letter? When the letter was just sent, Shui Rulan's matter happened. Father was in the wrong, so he turned a blind eye to Madame D and her daughter's secret actions. The reason was because of today's farce. In order to achieve their goals, Madame D and her daughter were really unscrupulous. On the surface, they appeared to be compromising, but in fact, no one knew how evil they were. Your Aunt Shui. She has no face. Madame Dowager sighed, and the wrinkles between her eyebrows deepened. This was another thing that annoyed her a lot. This matter was so big that almost everyone in the mansion knew about it. How could Shui Rulan, as a girl, bear such a burden? Grandma was not stupid. Her thought. After thinking, Qin, Rulan Qin, and said with, Madam. Mad, Wanru. Sure, Madam Qin, Madam, Wanru, so, Madam, R, Qin, Ruang, D, Huaisher, Madam Qin, Madam. Qin. A Madam Madam. Madam. Qin, Madam, you, Madam of Madam, Nan Madam Madam. Madam. Madam Madam. Madam, Madam. Madam was not stupid. She thought for a while and her face changed. Did your Aunt Shui fall into someone's trap and become a pawn? Looking at Qin Wanru's calm and aggrieved look, old grandma's eyes flashed with a trace of disgust. She slammed her hand on the table and said, It must be Madame D, the wicked woman. She didn't hesitate to destroy Rulan and you for her precious daughter. Putting all the things together, it was clear that Madame D used this matter to control Qin Huayong and made him feel guilty about Madame D. Then she talked about exchanging the marriage, which made Qin Huayong silent. Madame Dowager understood Qin Huayong's meaning. She thought it was not bad for her youngest daughter to marry into Magistrate Qi. Compared with her eldest daughter who had already climbed up the social ladder, sacrificing her youngest daughter was nothing. Besides, he felt guilty to Madame D because of Shui Rulan. So, he would not say anything. I will get your Aunt Shui out. I will never let this evil woman get what she wants. Madam said angrily after making up her mind. She plotted against Rulan, made her and her son feel guilty, and even controlled her granddaughter's marriage. Madame D really thought that she could do whatever she wanted. What if Aunt Shui is not willing? Qin Wanru reminded old grandma. In her last life, Shui Rulan stayed in the Buddha hall for more than half a year and became a Buddhist monk at home. When old grandma was seriously ill, she came out to serve old grandma and finally became her father's concubine Shui. Because Shui Rulan was not interested in her father, she never competed for his favor and even took the initiative to push her father away. As a result, Madame D's servant girl helped her to win the favor of her concubine. She conspired with Madame D to make trouble for Shui Rulan. Therefore, Shui Rulan died in the end. In her last life, Shui Rulan had always been kind to her. After old grandma passed away, Shui Rulan had been protecting her. However, Shui Rulan could not even protect herself, let alone old grandma. In this life, she would never let Shui Rulan be tortured by Madame D like this. But it depended on old grandma's decision. Shui Rulan was a proud woman and never wanted to be a concubine. This was also the main reason why she did not compete for Madame D's favor. She wanted to give old grandma a hint to praise Shui Rulan. As for Shui Rulan, she would also go to resolve the knot in her heart. Although Shui Rulan was gentle, she was not stupid. It could even be said that she was gentle and unyielding. I will tell Rulan about it, and I will not let Rulan be plotted against in vain. Old grandma sneered and her face darkened under the candlelight. She was also a woman who had fought in the backyard. At this time, how could she not understand Madame D's sinister intention? Since this evil woman did not cherish it, there must be someone who cherished it. Since her grandmother was involved in this matter, Qin Wanru knew that Shui Rulan would not suffer a loss. She was relieved, leaned back, put away the coldness in her eyes, and changed the topic to ask, "Grandma, do you still have your fenghua glazed lamp?" She did not dare to ignore the matter of Prince Chen. Chapter 14. Do you want the fenghua glazed cup? Old Madam Qin asked with a strange look. Yes. Qin Wanru blinked and nodded. Do you really want it? Old Madam Qin asked again. I really want it. Qin Wanru said helplessly. In fact, it was not her who wanted it, but Prince Chen wanted it. Even if she didn't want to cling to him, she didn't dare to offend him. Since a fenghua glazed lamp could get rid of him, then why not? Why did Prince Chen want the fenghua glazed cup? With his noble identity, he had seen all kinds of good things, but why did he want her fenghua glazed cup? There must be something behind it. Fenghua glazed cup was precious, but with his identity, he could have any treasure he wanted. Now looking at her grandmother's behavior, Qin Wanru knew that the fenghua glazed cup was not simple, but she didn't want to ask. The fenghua glazed cup is not in Grandma's hands. Seeing that Qin Wanru insisted, old Madam Qin sighed and waved her hand to let others leave the room. Why is it not in Grandma's hands? After everyone left, Qin Wanru asked curiously. A while ago, I left it in the hands of the abbess of Jingshin Monastery. I wanted to donate it, but I didn't think it was appropriate. So, I left it in her hands and let her keep it for a while. She said that she would exchange the incense money for it, but she never did. Old Madam Qin looked at Qin Wanru and said vaguely. Grandma, don't you like the fenghua glazed cup? Wan thinks it's beautiful. Qin Wanru tilted her head and asked in confusion. It seemed that Grandma didn't want the fenghua glazed cup, or did she mean that the fenghua glazed cup was too hot? If so, it should be sent to Prince Chen's hands as soon as possible. Some things in the hands of ordinary people would cause trouble. I don't like it very much. Looking at it reminds me of something. Old Madam Qin shook her head and sighed. She said bluntly, Wan, since you like it, take 100 taels of silver to Jingshin Monastery tomorrow to donate the incense money, and bring the fenghua glazed cup back. There were some things that Madam Qin actually wanted to avoid, but it seemed that it was really preordained. Whoever belonged to whom, no one could take it away. Old Madam Qin didn't want to talk more about this. After saying this, she asked about Qin Wanru's injury and asked people to take care of her early. It was a quiet night. When Qin Wanru woke up the next day, she didn't feel as painful as before. After Qin Yu helped her to get up, she went to greet Madame Dowager. Madame Dowager gave her 100 taels of silver and let her go out of the mansion. Jingshin Monastery was a small monastery outside of Jiangzhou City. It did not have a lot of incense. However, the old grandma liked the monastery owner very much. She said that the owner of the monastery was still in the secular world. She was a Taoist master. In the past, when she went out of the city, she would come to Jingshin Monastery to worship the Buddha. Qin Wanru was closest to old Madam Qin. When old Madam Qin came here many times, Qin Wanru followed her every time. She was also very familiar with Jingshin Monastery. Therefore, he didn't take many people with him. Qing Feng was about to walk out of the door. However, when he was at the door of Chuehua Monastery, he was stopped by two old maids. Second Miss, Madam and General ordered that no one should go out at this time in case of trouble. The old maid said. Qin Wanru frowned. Our miss was ordered by Madame Dowager to go to Jingshin Monastery outside of the city. Why don't you get out of the way? Qin Yu stood out from behind Qin Wanru and said. Madam and General said that it's better not to go out, especially Second Mississippi. The two old maids didn't give way at all. Although they looked respectful, what they said was actually not respectful. Everyone knew that the second miss was not the madam's biological daughter and was not favored by the madam. Moreover, it was the general who ordered them to keep an eye on the second miss and not let her run around. Even if it was Madame Dowager's idea, they had to ask the general first. Therefore, The two old maids were very confident. How dare you? Qin Yu was furious that they didn't even give face to Madame Dowager. Let's go. Looking at the tough attitude of the two old maids, Qin Wanru pulled Qin Yu's sleeves and turned to leave. After what happened yesterday, it was reasonable that they didn't allow her to go out. Although it might work if she went to Grandma, she was afraid that it would make Grandma and Father quarrel. The only person she could rely on in the mansion now was Grandma. She couldn't let Grandma quarrel with Father because of her to the point that it was out of control. Chapter 15. Qin Wanru, are you going out to get the Fenghua glazed lamp? Prince Chen raised his black eyes, looking gentle and elegant, and even his tone was gentle. Then he turned his head and coughed weakly. One day was enough for him to know Qin Wanru's name. Of course, Qin Wanru knew that this so-called gentleness was actually an illusion. Yes, please help me, Your Highness. Although Qin Wanru was very nervous, she still sincerely begged. If there was anyone in this mansion who could make her father obediently let them go, it must be Prince Chen in front of her. Does it have something to do with me? The teenager raised his handsome eyes and turned his head to look at her up and down. His smile was still elegant, but his tone was a little sarcastic. It's the Fenghua glazed lamp that Your Highness wants. Qin Wanru clenched her fists and said respectfully as if she didn't see the sarcasm in his eyes. I want to see if you have a way to get out by yourself. Prince Chen narrowed his eyes without changing his expression. His pale face immediately looked extremely evil because of this expression, and he was no longer just a handsome teenager. If you can't even get out of your own house, don't take the Fenghua glazed lamp. So, Your Highness, you don't care about what happened before? Qin Wanru was overjoyed and asked cautiously. How could it be possible? Do I look like a person who is so easy to talk to? Prince Chen sneered, and his eyes became malicious. That kind of gaze made Qin Wanru lower her head more and more. Go and bring the Fenghua glazed lamp to me. Qin Wanru, I promise you another benefit. Prince Chen said lazily. Your Highness, what? You don't like it? That handsome face seemed to have a gloomy look again. Yes, as you say, Your Highness. Qin Wanru gritted her teeth and said. He was right about one thing. This was the place where she grew up. Since she couldn't go out openly, she could go out secretly. Moreover, with his identity, she was quite looking forward to the benefits he promised her. Go and come back quickly. Prince Chen waved his hand, and Qin Wanru peeped at him. His expression was almost joyful at this moment. His change was too fast. He clenched his fists tightly, bowed respectfully, and retreated. Then, he frowned and stood outside the door. When he heard the young man's hateful and proud laughter, he couldn't help but purse his thin lips. Prince Chen did it on purpose. Miss, how do we get out? Qin Yu didn't even dare to raise her head when she entered the door. Now that she was out of the door, she was relieved, but also worried. Let's go to the old place. Qin Wanru pulled herself together and exhaled a long breath. But old madam doesn't allow you to go there anymore. Hearing the old place, Qin Yu became nervous and said hurriedly. What are you afraid of? No one will know if I don't say it or you don't say it. Ask someone to prepare the carriage, and I will go to Jingxin Monastery when I leave the yard. Qin Wanru ordered. Now there was only one way. Yes, this servant will go immediately. Young miss, please be careful. Qin Yu was worried and warned again, and then left Prince Chen's yard with Qin Wanru in one direction. Prince, actually, it's just a piece of cake. In the room, when Prince Chen finished laughing, Xiao Xuanzi, the personal eunuch, said carefully in a low voice. Looking at the pitiful little girl just now, he even frowned. I'm sick and can't raise my hand. The handsome young man in the high fur coat said casually, and then stood up with interest, let's go out and have a look. It's tiring to stay inside for a long time. Prince, you'd better have a good rest. This time we are also here to see that miracle-working doctor. If you can get his treatment, your illness may be cured. Hearing that his master wanted to go out, Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly persuaded. His master was not in good health, and he couldn't go out as he liked like others. If he accidentally got sick again, he couldn't pay for it even at the cost of his life. I'm going to have fun. The young man said indifferently, ignored Xiao Xuanzi, and walked out. Seeing that he had gone out, Xiao Xuanzi didn't dare to stop him. He picked up Prince Chen's cloak from the side screen and chased after him. When he arrived at the door, 2 guards also followed him. There was a swing frame hanging on a big tree in the corner of the garden, and there was a green vine beside it. The green vines had small purple flowers, which were very beautiful. When the wind blew, the green leaves turned and the flower buds were about to bloom. This was Qin Wanru's favorite place in the past. The swing was built by her, and the green arrowheads were planted by her. This small corner of the garden could almost be regarded as her territory. But since she fell from the swing once, Madame Dowager did not allow her to come here. Chapter 16. Qin Wanru stood on the swing frame and reached out to pull the ropes on both sides of the swing frame. It was very secure. Grandma should be afraid that she would secretly come here to play, so she specially asked people to tighten it. Since there was no problem here, Qin Wanru turned back and sat down, but hesitated after sitting on it. She reached out to touch her arm, which was still injured, and didn't know whether she would make a mistake. She looked up at the high courtyard wall, and the swing could completely swing to the position of the courtyard wall. Anyway, she had to try. She pulled the ropes on both sides and kicked back hard. The swing swung up and then slid down, bumping back against the trunk behind her. When she felt it was almost the right time, Qin Wanru kicked back directly on the trunk behind her, and the swing swung out again. Then she came back and kicked again. Because she was familiar with it, she almost stretched out her feet in the same position, and the swing swung out was also higher and higher. Seeing that the courtyard wall was getting closer and closer to her, Qin Wanru stared at the high wall in front of her. She loosened her hands and threw herself out, lying on the high courtyard wall. Miss, are you okay? Qin Yu had been waiting outside the courtyard wall. Seeing her figure, she asked in a low voice. Okay, how could she be okay? Qin Wanru felt a tingling pain in her injured arm, and knew that her wound might be torn again. It was so painful that she was about to cry. Her hands were soft, and she almost fell from the high wall. She clenched her teeth with all her might and held on. She calmed herself down and slightly relaxed her hand. After the wave of pain that surged up like a tidal wave, her pink cherry lips immediately turned pale. She trembled a few times but did not let out a single sound. Qin Wanru finally got over the wave of pain, and looked sideways at her arm. Sure enough, the coat, which was not thick, had oozed blood. She clearly knew that she might not be able to hold on for a long time, so she turned her head and slightly moved to the left side. There happened to be a tree there, a tree growing against the courtyard wall. When she held the trunk of the tree and slid to the ground outside the courtyard, Qin Wanru's body became soft and fell to the ground. Qin Yu reacted quickly and half held her, and said anxiously, Miss, how are you? I'm fine, let's go. Forcing himself to calm down, beads of sweat rolled down from his pale face, making that childish little face look very pitiful. He was clearly just a child, but his eyes revealed a ruthless tenacity. Qin Yu felt that her miss seemed to be a different person since she woke up yesterday. In the past, no matter in terms of temperament or personality, she always gave people a feeling of naivety. Today, she was still naivety, but her temperament was no longer naivety. It was as if her heart had changed. Of course, Qin Yu also knew that this was impossible. But it was certain that Miss had changed. However, Qin Yu was very happy to see such a change. At least her young mistress would not be fooled by Madam and young mistress anymore. The carriage was brought by Qin Yu, and it was the most common one in the mansion. Qin Yu helped Qin Wanru get on the carriage, and the carriage slowly went to Jingxin Monastery outside the city. Master, it's windy here. Let's go back. Xiao Xuanzi looked at his master's pale face and said. Chu Luqian ignored Xiao Xuanzi. Instead, he walked to the swing frame and looked at it with interest. Just now, he was at the door of the moon cave and saw Qin Wanru climb over the wall. He had never seen a miss from an aristocratic family could climb over the walls so skillfully. Shouldn't she sit and not shake her knees? The rope was relatively firm. Chu Luqian pulled it, turned around and sat on the swing frame. He curiously said to Xiao Xuanzi beside him, push. Master, you are not in good health. Xiao Xuanzi was so anxious that he was about to sweat. Was this kind of strenuous activity really suitable for his master? Push. Chu Luqian narrowed his eyes and looked at the courtyard wall. The handsome face of the handsome young man was expressionless. Yes. Looking at his master's expressionless face, Xiao Xuanzi's heart trembled. It was the most difficult to understand his master's mind in this situation. He didn't dare to talk nonsense. He reached out and pushed back, and the swing also swung. With the same position and the same kick, Xiao Xuanzi felt that the next scene was like a copy of the second Miss Qin just now. If it was not his prince, he would be happy to see it. But if it was his prince, this made his face as pale as Chu Luqian's. Master, be careful. Master, let me help you push. Chapter 17. Xiao Xuanzi was so scared that he was trembling when he saw that his master also jumped on the wall. Fortunately, his master didn't lean on the wall like the second Miss Qin just now. Instead, he stood and looked steady. Chu Luqian stood on the wall, and his eyes fell on a drop of blood on the wall. He frowned and then looked at the drop of blood in front of him. Drop by drop, from the top of the wall to the tree, and even along the trunk to a place, then disappeared. There was a mark of the shaft, and it should be a carriage. He raised his beautiful eyes and looked into the distance, and only saw the back of a carriage. She was really a clever little girl. She actually thought of using this method to leave. Then there was nothing to see. Xiao Xuanzi slipped and fell from the wall. Xiao Xuanzi was really scared and fell to the ground at this time. He helplessly watched his master fall from the high wall, and then reached out to hold the high wall on one side. He covered his chest and coughed violently. Master, are you okay, master? Xiao Xuanzi rolled and crawled over, and reached out to hold Chu Luqian. I'm okay, go back. Chu Luqian slowly stood up after a few coughs, and said lightly, but he didn't move his feet. Master, do you want me to push the chair over? Xiao Xuanzi asked. Chu Luqian nodded and pointed to the swing. Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly helped him to sit on the swing, which could be used as a chair when it didn't shake. Master, wait here, I'll be back soon. Xiao Xuanzi saw him sit down, and quickly ran back to get the chair. The handsome young boy closed his eyes, and his long and curly eyelashes fluttered twice. His thin lips were slightly hooked, and his lazy posture revealed a sense of illness, but it was not the expressionless look that Xiao Xuanzi saw just now. Jingxin Monastery was not far from Ningyuan Army General's mansion, and they arrived in half an hour. After knowing Qin Wanru's intention, the master of Jingxin Monastery asked the little nun beside her to find the Fenghua glazed lamp left by old Madame Qin. Thank you, nun. Seeing the Fenghua glazed lamp, Qin Wanru was relieved. She found the golden thigh. It's fine. It's not an ordinary item to begin with. How could it be left here so casually? The abbess of Jingxin Monastery was a very kind nun in her 50s or 60s. She smiled and pushed the bag with the Fenghua glazed lamp to her. Second Miss Qin, take a look. Is it this one? Yes, it is. Thank you, nun. Qin Wanru thanked her. The master of Jingxin Monastery could not help but laugh when she saw the young girl raise her bright eyes and act like an adult. She was familiar with old Madame Qin, so she was familiar with Qin Wanru. She reached out her hand and gently touched the hair on her head. I heard that something happened to the general's mansion. How is the old madam? The news of the bridal sedan chair being smashed had spread like wildfire. Even a remote nunnery like Jingshin Monastery knew about it. It could be seen how powerful the news was. The news spread so fast, of course, because there were so many people who saw it at that time, or it could be said that Qi Tianyu deliberately invited many people to escort the bride. Originally, he wanted to embarrass Qin Wanru, but now it was Qin Yuru who was embarrassed. Is everyone talking about it? Qin Wanru asked curiously. She really wanted to know the reaction of this matter, but it was not convenient for her to ask outside. Since the master of Jingshin Monastery also knew about it, it was inevitable for her to ask. Moreover, she also knew that this matter was not over yet. How could the mother and daughter be willing to bear all the responsibility? Yes, the master of Jingshin Monastery said gently, I heard that second miss smashed the bridal sedan chair of Qi's mansion in anger yesterday. It was because first Miss Qin wanted to abandon her childhood sweetheart, first young Master Qi, because she was greedy for a high position in the capital city. I didn't expect first Miss Qin, such a gentle person, to have such a temperament. After she finished speaking, she sighed and looked at Qin Wanru's injured arm. Second Miss Qin, were you hurt by the evil slave yesterday? Let me take a look at it, is it serious? Thank you, none. Qin Wanru thanked her. Everyone in Jiangzhou Prefecture knew that the master of Jingshin Monastery had good medical skills. Usually, when there were pilgrims who came to Jingshin Monastery or farmers who were sick, they would come to see the master of Jingshin Monastery. Therefore, the master of Jingshin Monastery had a good reputation in Jiangzhou. However, Qin Wanru knew that the master of Jingshin Monastery was not the master of Jingshin Monastery, but her junior sister, Mingqiu Nun. Qin Wanru knew this because Mingqiu Nun liked Qin Wanru very much. She had repeatedly expressed to old grandma that she wanted to take Qin Wanru as her disciple and pass her medical skills to her. However, she was always politely rejected by old grandma. Second Miss Qin, come in with me. The master of Jingshin Monastery stood up and walked inside. Qin Wanru followed. When she reached the inner room, she took off her outer shirt, revealing the injury inside. Chapter 18. Where did this powder come from? The Reverend of Jingshin Monastery took a clean cloth to wipe off the powder mixed with blood on Qin Wanru's wound and asked casually. No one noticed that a trace of darkness flashed across her eyes. Her hands were slightly trembling, but she clenched her fists tightly. When she raised her hand again, her hand stabilized. Was it that person's medicine? After so many years, he finally appeared. It should be the medicine that Grandma asked the doctor to use. Qin Wanru looked at the wound on her arm and said with a little confusion. She really didn't know. Go back and ask old Madam Qin for me. Which doctor gave this powder? The Reverend of Jingshin Monastery said softly, but her voice revealed a kind of heaviness that Qin Wanru could hear. She looked sideways and thought, is there something wrong with this powder? Okay, I will ask Grandma when I go back and send a message to the Reverend. Qin Wanru said with a smile. During the conversation, the Reverend of Jingshin Monastery had cleaned her wound. She picked up a bottle and sprinkled the powder on her wound again and then carefully bandaged it. When everything was ready, she stood up and washed her hands in the basin beside her. Qin Wanru also put on her clothes with the help of Qin Yu. After thanking the Reverend of Jingshin Monastery again, Qin Wanru left the money and went down the mountain with Qin Yu. However, when she was about to reach the gate of her mansion, she was stopped by someone. Is it the second miss of Qin's mansion in the carriage? The voice was so familiar. Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes and showed a sense of understanding. She left the mansion secretly and no one would know it unless someone had been guarding the carriage in her mansion outside. She left in a hurry and didn't have time to report the news. Now there was no one who could stop her outside the mansion except the first young master of Qi's mansion. Of course, Qi Tianyu wouldn't give up without asking clearly. The smile on the corner of his lips was cold. Since this was the case, he didn't have to think about it. Yes, it is our second Mississippi. Qin Yu lifted the curtain and looked out as she spoke. Sure enough, she saw Qi Tianyu standing in front of the door with a servant. She couldn't help but look cold and angry. Qi Tianyu had always been good to Qin Wanru in the past, but she didn't expect that he would want to kill her Mississippi. Young Master Qi, you have nothing to do with our second Mississippi. Why are you stopping her? Qin Yu clearly saw Qi Tianyu's intention to protect Qin Yuru yesterday. She also realized that if her miss really got on the bridal sedan chair yesterday, her reputation would have been ruined. Therefore, she no longer had a good impression of Qi Tianyu. Sister Wanru, can I have a word with you? Qi Tianyu ignored Qin Yu and looked at the half-closed curtain and said bitterly. What happened yesterday was not only embarrassing for Qin Yuru, but also for him. He used to be a good child admired by everyone, but now he was being criticized by others. Qi Tianyu, a proud man, could hardly bear it. Young Master Qi, what do you want to say? Qin Wanru didn't get out of the carriage and said coldly. In her previous life, Qi Tianyu was not reconciled to the fact that he had ruined her reputation. Later, he went to the capital and got the third place in the imperial examination. After he became an official, he helped Madame D and her daughter to humiliate her. Although she explained it again and again, he refused to listen and only said that he would trample her into the dirtiest mud. And they did do it. Qin Wanru didn't want to see such a selfish and headstrong person again. Sister Wanru, is it true that Sister Yuru doesn't want to do it? Qi Tianyu said bitterly. He always thought that Qin Yuru liked him and she loved him deeply. He didn't expect that one day he would be abandoned by Qin Yuru in such a dishonorable way. Was Qin Yuru forced to do it? Young Master Qi, this is between you and my big sister. What does it have to do with me? Qin Wanru sneered mercilessly. Sister Wanru, you. Why are you so mean now? Qi Tianyu looked at the half-closed curtain sadly. He didn't understand why Qin Wanru, who used to be such a lovely girl and would always show a lovely and beautiful smile when she saw people, became so mean now. Was this still the little girl he knew, who was smiling like a flower? She used to call him Brother Tianyu, but now she showed such a cold and distant look. He felt inexplicably sad. Young Master Qi, what you said is ridiculous. If I let you carry the bridal sedan chair to your door and let you make things difficult for me, I wouldn't be able to explain myself now. I'm afraid that others would talk about me harshly. Qin Wanru sneered and said to Qin Yu, let's go back. She would not help Qin Yuru to explain. If they had something to say, let them talk it out. Qi Tianyu certainly knew what would happen if they carried the bridal sedan chair back yesterday. Being pointed out by Qin Wanru, he stepped back guiltily. The carriage passed by him, leaving only a very cold sentence, Young Master Qi, if you want to know something, you'd better ask Big Sister directly. But I guess Big Sister doesn't want to see you now. Qin Wanru was not easy to deal with. When she faced Qi Tianyu alone, she had a lot of ways to make him believe her. However, she was not afraid that he would confront her, she was afraid that he would not go. Qin Yuru would not be reconciled, Madame D would not be reconciled, and Qi Tianyu would not be reconciled either. Then let them talk it out face to face, and then make it real. The bigger it was, the better. Jiangzhou was too far from the capital city. The bigger it was, the farther it would spread. Qi Tianyu's eyes turned red because of the indifference and sarcasm in the girl's soft voice. He reached out and punched the tree beside him hard, then turned and strode away. He could not wait any longer. In any case, he had to see Qin Yuru and ask her face to face, even if his father said not to pursue it. Chapter 19. Qin Wanru entered the door directly this time. Although the guards were surprised how she went out, they didn't dare to stop her because the general and the madam only told them not to go out but not to come in. Although second miss didn't win the madam's favor, old grandma always spoiled her, so no one dared to treat her badly in Ningyuan army general's mansion. Qin Wanru went directly to Prince Chen's yard. After waiting outside for a while, she was asked to go in. After a while, Qin Wanru felt that Prince Chen seemed to have changed his clothes. It was a bright red brocade robe. Few men could suppress such a gorgeous color, but it made him look more handsome and leisurely. However, it also made the prince's lips look even paler and sicker. Prince Chen looked so handsome that she, as a woman, couldn't help but be jealous of him. With one hand on the table, he looked at her from the corner of his eyes as she walked in. He looked her up and down, and a playful smile appeared on his light-colored lips. Coupled with his shimmering eyes, he seemed to be gazing at her affectionately. Of course, this was just a feeling. Anyone who was not afraid of death would not know how he died. In fact, no one was worthy of such a handsome man. At least in her last life, even when she died, it was said that Prince Chen didn't have a crown princess. Found it? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and his eyes were deep and shimmering. Child, please have a look. Is it this one? Qin Wanru took the small package from Qing Yu's hand and presented it respectfully. Xiao Xuanzi took it hurriedly, opened it and presented it to the table in front of Chu Luchen respectfully. Chu Luchen picked it up and played with it for a while, nodded and said, "It's good. Then I will forgive you for disturbing me. What about the other thing you mentioned, child?" Qin Wanru pursed her lips and carefully hinted, "I went out on my own this time, and I didn't ask anyone for help." She hinted that he said he would give her a benefit, and she really needed it. "I know you went out on your own." "Good." Chu Luchen narrowed his eyes and looked very lazy. He leaned back and his pale face looked a little tired. "Master, are you tired?" Xiao Xuanzi saw Chu Luchen's state and immediately flattered him. "Oh, I'm tired." Chu Luchen nodded and even closed his eyes. The smile on his face became more and more indifferent, almost becoming invisible. Qin Wanru's little face turned red because of anger. She didn't believe that he would forget. This guy was clearly trying to go back on his word. As a dignified prince, no, not a prince, but a crown prince, he had the nerve to go back on his word. "Then let me help you to go in and have a rest," Xiao Xuanzi said to his master carefully. "This is good." Chu Liuchen's hand slid up a little to support his forehead and said vaguely. "Then." Xiao Xuanzi still wanted to say something respectful, but was interrupted by Qin Wanru. "Prince has promised me that if I can get the Fenghua glazed lamp with my own ability, Prince will give me other benefits." Qin Wanru felt that she was too simple to bear. In front of such an adult, this young prince had the face to pretend to be tired. He must think that she was a real fool. "Is there such a thing?" Chu Luchen slightly opened his eyes and asked. "There is such a thing." Qin Wanru gritted her teeth and answered. She didn't allow herself to be defeated. She really needed it, otherwise she would not mention it to Prince Chen again and again at the risk of her life. Although she was trembling with fear, she still told herself again and again that she was a girl and a child, so she was not sensible. "I didn't hear it," Xiao Xuanzi answered. They were almost at the same time. Hearing her clear and firm voice, Xiao Xuanzi inexplicably felt a little embarrassed. It was actually very embarrassing to make a false testimony and meet a real witness. "You two have a debate first. I will have a rest." Chu Liuchen's handsome face showed tiredness. He lazily turned his head to look at Qin Wanru, and his fox-like eyes squinted again. "Do you have a request from me?" "I don't have anything to ask of you." Since Prince Chen refused to admit it, how could he force him to keep his word? This was Prince Chen. Qin Wanru suddenly sobered up, restrained the anger on her face, and lowered her head. She was actually a pretentious person. And the reason why she was so ruthless to him before should be because of this condition of his. She could be ruthless, she could endure, and she was smart. She could decisively extend her claws, and she could also neatly retract them. She was much better than those noble ladies who wanted to pounce on him. Maybe her plan could be changed because of her. In fact, it is not impossible to negotiate. Tell me, what benefits do you want? Chapter 20. Can I ask your highness to help me get something? Qin Wanru probed carefully. With his identity, he must have brought a lot of guards. Although there seemed to be only a few people here, Qin Wanru knew that these were all in the open, and there must be more people secretly protecting this master. What is it? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and smiled gently, as if he was not the evildoer who made Qin Wanru so angry just now. A seal. Qin Wanru actually did not know what this seal was used for, but she knew that Qin Yuru had won the favor of old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion with this seal. Later, Qin Yuru was even taken into Duke Xing's mansion and raised as the Miss of Duke Xing's mansion for a period of time. Because of this, Qin Yuru was so confident that she not only suppressed Qin Wanru but also her grandmother. Qin Wanru did not know why this seal was so useful, and it seemed to be related to her. She had seen this seal. When she was angry and fought with Qin Yuru, she took it out proudly after being pushed to the ground by Qin Yuru. Qin Wanru, do you know what this is? This is a seal. I heard it is yours, but it is mine now. Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion also gave me preferential treatment for the sake of this seal. Even if you fight with your life, what can you do? With Duke Xing's mansion, what can Grandma do to me? In the vicious and wanton sneer, the seal fell on her face. Qin Wanru saw it clearly, but then her head was pressed heavily on the ground, and her hair was pulled up. She knocked on the ground several times. She saw blood in front of her eyes, and then the pain made her fall into the boundless darkness. The burning pain seemed to be in front of her again, and she could not help clenching her fists, trying to see the real scene in front of her clearly. The pain had passed, and she was reborn. What kind of seal is it? Who has it? Chu Luchen asked playfully. A seal engraved with bluegrass pattern is in my mother's hand, but I don't know where it is hidden. Please help me, Prince. Qin Wanru took a deep breath, suppressed the waves of blood rolling in her heart, and bowed sideways respectfully. Originally, she wanted to take her time to get this seal, but since Prince Qin had promised to give her benefits, Qin Wanru felt that this benefit was the most suitable. Compared with her, it should not be difficult for the prince to send someone to find this thing. She had to get this seal first and cut off the connection between Qin Yuru and Duke Xing's mansion. Without the background of Duke Xing's mansion, her grandmother and herself would not be beaten and suppressed all the time. The sooner this matter is settled, the better. A bluegrass seal. That's rare. This should be a private seal. Are there any words engraved on it? Chu Liuchen's voice was lazy and gentle as he smiled. Are there words? She seemed to have, but her face was covered in blood at that time, so she couldn't see clearly. Prince, it seems that there are words, but there is an orchid pattern in the middle. Qin Wanru confirmed again. I can help you, but Qin Wanru, you should remember that you owe me a favor. Chu Luchen said casually. He had promised to give her benefits, but why did it become a favor from him? Qin Wanru was helpless, but she also knew that this was the only way. The seal was really important, so important that it didn't matter if she owed Prince Qin a favor. Moreover, thinking about the identity of this prince, it seemed that even if she tried her best, it would be impossible for her to help him. Therefore, this so-called favor was just for show. Okay, then I owe you a favor. Qin Wanru compromised and nodded. Remember to return this king's favor. Chu Luchen squinted at her and smiled leisurely. His voice was still soft, but there was a hidden majesty and coldness. Qin Wanru suddenly felt that this agreement, in fact, might not be as simple as she thought. She had a faint feeling of retreating, but instantly she suppressed the panic in her heart and said affirmatively again, Yes, Prince, I will definitely return the favor. When she said this, there was no time for her to regret. Chapter 21. Qin Wanru walked to the table and picked up the brush on the table. After thinking for a while, she put down the brush and carefully picked up the paper. She handed it to Chu Luchen and said, "Your Highness, please have a look. This is the pattern. Well drawn." Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and looked at the painting. Qin Wanru felt bitter. After she came to the capital city in the last life, she didn't dare to meet people and only lived by painting. Therefore, her painting skills improved by leaps and bounds. However, no matter how good her painting skills were, she still brought herself to death because of her painting skills. Under the punishment of being cut in half at the waist, even the sky was twisted. When the knife fell, she didn't die completely and was in pain and despair. "Tonight, I will bring you the seal." Chu Luchen was smiling, but his smile became cold. "But you must not let others know about this, otherwise, don't worry, Your Highness. I didn't ask you for help, and you didn't do anything for me," Qin Wanru said with a serious face. Her white and tender face was tight, and she was very well behaved and sensible. But she didn't know that she was very cute when she pretended to be mature and steady at such a young age. With her delicate facial features and a little baby fat on her face, she looked very cute. "Go." Chu Luchen was very satisfied. He reached out his hand and naturally pinched her little chubby face. Then he waved his hand when Qin Wanru was in a daze. Qin Wanru felt painful and wronged. She felt that Prince Chen seemed to be driving a puppy away. She took a deep breath and bowed respectfully to him before turning around and retreating. Only when she was outside the door did she heave a sigh of relief. Her back was covered in cold sweat, and her watery eyes turned to look at the entrance of the courtyard with some vigilance. Prince Chen really had many faces. Sometimes he was as gentle as jade, sometimes he was cold and enchanting, and sometimes he was a little rascal at his age. But she was sure that no matter which side he was on, he was dangerous. However, although it was dangerous, he was also a man with a bright future. Should she hold on to him or not? It seemed that if there was a need, she should hold on to him. Anyway, she was just a child now. Having made up his mind, he relaxed and turned around to walk out with Qin Yu. This time, she went back to her yard directly, but on the way, she sent Qin Yu out and asked her to inquire about Qin Yuru. Qi Tianyu was not a good-tempered person. Qin Yu came back quickly. Qin Wanru had just returned to her room. Not long after she sat down, she came back. "Miss, first miss is fine." Qin Yu wiped her sweat and said, "Nothing. Does first miss have any plans to go out?" Qin Wanru was stunned for a moment and suddenly laughed. Qi Tianyu didn't take action. However, it wasn't too surprising. "Yes, I heard from the servant girl in First Miss's yard that First Miss would go out tonight. She asked Madam to tell the old maid at Chuehua Gate." Qin Yu thought for a while and said. When she was sent out, she specially went to the Chuehua Gate to verify this news and carefully inquired about it. The old maid at the Chuehua Gate didn't let them pass. "Tonight?" Qin Wanru's delicate fingers hooked on the handkerchief and pulled it twice, then she put it down with a smile. Qi Tianyu really couldn't wait any longer. It seemed that there would be a good show tonight. She was actually looking forward to it. She turned to the desk and picked up the pen. After thinking for a while, she put the pen down. After a while, she finished writing. When it was a little dry, she found a letter and sealed it in it. Then she handed it to Qin Yu. "Go look for Nanny Yu later and ask Brother Fengzi to find a way to deliver this letter to Brother Baiyu. He'll be able to understand it. He'll follow Brother Baiyu to watch the fun tonight and report back to me after he's done." Qi Baiyu was the illegitimate son of Magistrate Qi. He was also the second brother who Qi Tianyu said had an affair with Qin Wanru. He was 12 years old and very smart and talented, but Qi Tianyu always looked down on him. When Magistrate Qi's mansion and Ningyuan army general's mansion traveled together, Qi Baiyu and Qin Wanru, who were about the same age, often traveled together. In her previous life, it was with Qi Baiyu's help that she could get a good chance to temporarily escape from that suffocating mansion when her husband died and she was despised by everyone. Yes, Miss. I will go now. Qin Yu nodded, took the letter and turned to leave. After dinner, old grandma sent someone to check on her. She found that she was fine, so she asked Nanny to remind her to pay more attention to her wound and then left. After everyone left, Qin Wanru didn't sleep after washing up. She picked up a lamp and randomly picked up a medical book in front of the window to read. She was waiting for that seal. She was also waiting for something to happen to Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru secretly left from the back door of Ningyuan Army General's mansion in the evening. She and Qi Tianyu had agreed to meet in the restaurant where they often met. The two of them often met in private in the past, so they were very familiar with each other. There was even a private room in that restaurant that Qi Tianyu had always reserved. Qin Yuru put on a curtain hat and went out. When she arrived at the private room, Qi Tianyu was already seated and looked at Qin Yuru with a gloomy face. When Qin Yuru came in, Mei Shui, the maid, helped her take off the curtain hat. Then, together with Qi Tianyu's servant, they stood behind the door with their heads lowered and hands down. Brother Tianyu. Qin Yuru hurried to Qi Tianyu and almost staggered to his side. Her body suddenly went limp and she burst into tears. Qi Tianyu's face was still gloomy. His eyes fell on Qin Yuru's beautiful face coldly. Why? After a while, he asked in a hoarse voice. Brother Tianyu, I really don't know, why did this happen, those letters? I just saw them and I was so scared that I wanted to hide them. Brother Tianyu, I don't know where they came from. Why did my second sister know so clearly that I don't know? Qin Yuru cried. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her flower-like face was pale, and she looked extremely weak. Qi Tianyu's heart softened when he saw the woman he liked in such a state, crying as if she was about to die and kneeling beside his legs. You said that this has nothing to do with you and that it was Qin Wanru's plan? Brother Tianyu, I really don't know. When I saw that box, I was so scared that I lost control. Brother Tianyu. Don't you believe me? If I wanted to be engaged to my cousin, I wouldn't have agreed to your family's proposal at that time. Qin Wanru continued to cry and tears fell from her eyes one after another. How did Qin Wanru know that such letters were written in your dressing table? Qi Tianyu frowned and asked suspiciously. I don't know. I don't know why my second sister would do this. Maybe it wasn't my second sister. My second sister is so kind and young, how could she do such a thing? But I really don't know, where did the box containing the letters come from? Qin Yuru cried even more bitterly. Looking at Qin Yuru who was crying, Qi Tianyu hesitated. He had thought that Qin Yuru would not lie to him. They were childhood sweethearts after so many years of friendship. How could she do such a thing to him? Moreover, she was so kind and still protected her younger sister until now. Qi Tianyu hesitated. He reached out to wipe away the tears on Qin Yuru's face and asked again, You didn't lie to me? I won't lie to you. If I did, Brother Tianyu, I'll die a horrible death. Qin Yuru pointed to the sky and swore without hesitation. She knew that Qi Tianyu would not believe her if she did not say something harsh at this time. You really won't lie to me? Qi Tianyu asked in a deep voice. In his heart, he already believed most of her words. He reached out to pull Qin Yuru up from the ground. Qin Yuru threw herself into his arms and burst into tears. Brother Tianyu, what should we do now? What should we do? I'd better die so that I won't ruin your reputation. Qin Yuru cried in Qi Tianyu's arms and raised her head in panic. She looked at Qi Tianyu sadly and suddenly struggled out of his arms. She turned around and threw herself at the window. The restaurant was close to a big river in Jiangzhou. The current was always fast. If she jumped down from here, she would not survive. Seeing that Qin Yuru threw herself at the window, Qi Tianyu was anxious. He reached out to grab Qin Yuru's clothes and said hurriedly, I believe you, Sister Yuru. I believe you. Don't worry, let's figure out a way slowly. What else can we do? We've broken off the engagement. What else can we do? Qin Yuru cried so hard that she could not breathe. She was so weak that Qi Tianyu pulled her back into his arms again. She looked miserable. Don't worry, there will be a way. But how did your second sister put the brocade box in your dressing table? Qi Tianyu patted Qin Yuru's back to comfort her. Although he felt sorry for her, he still had some doubts. In fact, he did not completely solve his doubts. He calmed down and thought that Qin Wanru was just a naughty child. How could she do such a vicious thing? After all, she was too young, and she was well behaved and lovely in daily life. But, maybe she was also cheated. Qin Yuru wished that Qin Wanru was dead, but she had to defend Qin Wanru. She told Madame D the reason that she and Madame D had discussed. She has always been on good terms with Aunt Shuei. Although Shuei Rulan usually lived a simple life, the relationship between the two mansions was very good. Qi Tianyu also knew her because of the good relationship between the two mansions. Hearing Qin Yuru's words, Qi Tianyu suddenly felt that it was very possible. Qin Yuru had been whispering to him since a long time ago that Shuei Rulan looked quiet and indifferent, but she had always been thinking about her father in private. It's because of Ning Yuan army general. Qi Tianyu gnashed his teeth and said with hatred. He suddenly felt that he was right. Qin Wanru might be too young to understand things, but Shuei Rulan was an adult. She might have done such a vicious thing because she wanted to deal with Madame D. Do you know that a few days ago, she even seduced father into her room? Mother is arguing with father because of this. Maybe. Qin Yuru knew that Qi Tianyu believed her words at first glance, so she added fuel to the fire and cried. Bitch! Qi Tianyu had completely believed her at this time. He hugged Qin Yuru tightly and his face was livid with anger. Chapter 22. A few ruffians suddenly fell into the private room of the two of them while they were quarreling. The servant girl and the manservant were squeezed behind the door and screamed in pain, which attracted the crowd outside the private room to see what was going on. The people outside the private room were stunned when they saw the people in the private room. Qin Yuru suddenly came to her senses and pushed Qi Tianyu away. She turned to the side to avoid the sight of the people at the door. Where did you come from? Get out! Qi Tianyu's face darkened and he shouted at the ruffians at the door. Isn't this the first young master of the Qi family? Why does he have the mood to meet with someone at this time? Someone said in surprise. There were many people in Jiangzhou who knew Qi Tianyu. Qi Tianyu still had the mood to meet with a woman after that shameful thing happened. He was really bold. That is the first Miss Qin of Ning Yuan Army General's mansion. Although Qin Yuru moved away quickly, someone still recognized her and immediately shouted. As soon as he said that, the crowd at the entrance immediately boiled over. What happened just now was really shocking. In the past few days, everyone had been discussing this marriage. Who would have thought that they would actually see this pair of unmarried man and woman hugging each other? What was going on? The ruffians who fell on the ground climbed up with each other. Their hair and clothes were all disheveled, but this could not stop their curiosity. Didn't they say that first Miss Qin made a cuckold of the first young master of the Qi family and got pregnant secretly? Is it possible that the baby belongs to the first young master of the Qi family? A ruffian opened his eyes wide in surprise and looked at Qi Tianyu and Qin Yuru who was leaning to the side. This is also possible. Someone looked at the scene in front of them and replied. Then whose baby is it? Someone looked at Qin Wanru's belly. The crowd said one after another, and their words became more and more unpleasant. At this moment, Qin Yuru was so ashamed and angry that she wanted to die. You are so presumptuous. Qi Tianyu's face turned blue and then white. He shouted at the servant who had just squeezed out from behind the door, close the door. The manservant and the maid, who were knocked unconscious, immediately pushed the door with all their might. However, there were more and more people at the door. Everyone was squeezing to watch the fun, and the two of them were too weak. Qin Yuru panicked. Suddenly, she saw the curtain hat on the ground beside her hand. She hurriedly picked it up and put it on her head. She turned her head and whispered to her maid, Mei Shui, let's go. Get out of the way. Do you want to be punished for spreading rumors in the hall tomorrow? Qi Tianyu walked over and angrily pushed several people out of the door and shouted. Seeing that he was really angry, the ruffians at the door finally did not dare to go too far. They squeezed back and temporarily made a small passage at the door. Mei Shui supported Qin Yuru and hurriedly walked out. Is she Miss Qin's servant girl? That's right. Definitely. This time, everyone recognized Qin Wanru's servant girl. In the past, Qin Wanru often played outside, so there were many people who knew her personal servant girl. Hearing so many voices, Qin Yuru did not dare to stay and hurriedly went downstairs. However, she did not expect that she was in such a hurry that the veil on the curtain hat was caught somewhere. Suddenly, the moment when she went down the last flight of stairs, the curtain hat fell off. Under the curtain hat, Qin Yuru's crying face was immediately revealed. Qin Yuru shyly covered her face with her hands and rushed down the stairs to the carriage outside the door. Mei Shui followed closely behind. But the people upstairs and downstairs still saw it clearly, and they all burst into laughter. At the window of a private room on the third floor, a young boy with handsome features was leaning against it. He was laughing so hard that he was swaying back and forth, but even so, he did not make a sound. He only looked down at the corridor on the second floor, and Qi Tianyu was walking down with a sullen face. Miss, you don't know, Brother Fengzi said that now everyone is saying that first young master of the Qi family is a turtle. He was cuckolded, but he still hugged Miss Qin. Both of them are shameless and shameless. When Qin Yu came to report, she could not stop laughing. She said while wiping tears of laughter. Qin Wanru smiled faintly and put down the book in her hand. You all saw it? Yes, everyone saw it. There were so many people upstairs and downstairs, and the curtain hat fell at this time. Even if first young master covered her face, it would be useless. So many people saw it. First young master would not have the face to go out in the future. Qin Yu felt really relieved. In the past, eldest miss always looked gentle, but she often framed second miss behind her back. However, second miss always looked sincere and took the blame for eldest miss many times. Did you see Brother Baiyu? Thinking of Qin Yuru's embarrassing look, Qin Wanru could not help but smile. Brother Fengzi said he saw young Master Baiyu on the third floor. After discussing with young Master Baiyu, he sent someone to break in. First young master of the Qi family didn't know that Miss and young Master Baiyu already knew about the private room where he met first young master of the Qi family. He thought that it was done secretly. Qin Yu pursed her lips and was about to say something, but suddenly thought of something. The smile on her face was replaced by worry. She looked at Qin Wanru and said uneasily, Miss, Brother Fengzi said he saw first young master of the Qi family holding first young master when he went in. Does this mean that he forgave first young master of the Qi family? Did first young master say something to frame you? It's not me. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the candlestick in the room. She thought for a moment and said. Qi Tianyu was not stupid and would not fall for the same thing. After all, she was still young and could not do things that were too scheming. It could be Aunt Shui. Qin Yuru put the blame on someone else so that Qi Tianyu would forgive her. It was impossible for her to blame him, so it could only be Shui Rulin who had just been in trouble. Then what should we do? First young master of the Qi family will frame Miss Shui, who is such a kind person. Qin Yu said anxiously. I'll go to Aunt Shui tomorrow. Qin Wanru picked up the small scissors beside her and cut the wick of the candle. A trace of darkness flashed in her eyes. Even if today's incident did not happen, she would go to Aunt Shui tomorrow and seize the opportunity. Fortunately, Qin Yuru had an accident tonight and Madame D was panicking. Qi Tianyu would not extend his hands to Ning Yuan Army General's mansion for a while. She could take this opportunity to talk to Aunt Shui about it. Since some things could not be avoided, she had to face them. Seeing that it was late, Qin Wanru asked Qin Yu to go to bed. Thinking that someone might come later, she did not ask her to stay outside and let her go to sleep. After Qin Yu left, Qin Wanru still sat under the candlestick and casually flipped through the medical book. This medical book was given to her by Mingxiu nun in Jingxin Monastery because she saw that she was kindred spirits and wanted her to follow her to learn medicine. However, after it was given to her, she threw it aside and did not have any interest in reading it. Just now, Qin Yu found it from somewhere, which aroused her interest and casually flipped through it to relieve her boredom. The room was very quiet, and only the sound of candlelight could be heard. The wind blew in through the window, which was very pleasant. It was autumn, and the temperature was still very high during the day. However, at night, there was a cool breeze, and the heat during the day seemed to be completely dispersed. Qin Wanru originally thought that she could not read the medical book, but she did not expect that she was so engrossed in it that she did not even know when Chu Luchen came in. When the candlelight burst again, she raised her head and wanted to cut the candlelight. Then she saw Chu Luchen sitting in front of the window. She could not help but be shocked and suddenly stood up, with a pair of round watery eyes staring at him. She looked like a frightened little beast. "What book is it that you are reading so seriously?" Chu Luchen stretched out his hand and said. He was dressed in purple, but there was a black border on the collar. He leaned on the chair opposite Qin Wanru, supported his head with his hand, and played with the arm of the wide sandalwood chair, looking relaxed and comfortable. Qin Wanru silently handed over the medical book in her hand. Chu Luchen took it and casually flipped through it. He squinted at Qin Wanru and said, "Want to learn medicine?" "Yes." Qin Wanru nodded. "Why do you want to learn medicine?" His voice was gentle. "To treat a patient." Qin Wanru answered honestly. "To treat who?" "Me?" Chu Liuchen's lips slightly curved up, raising a smile. He was a teenager full of tiredness. Qin Wanru was silent this time, and then her eyes fell on a seal that he was playing with in his other hand. Her eyes immediately lit up. "This is for me." She had already stretched out her hand. "This seal doesn't look simple at all. It seems that I will suffer a loss if I give it to you like this." Chu Luchen said seriously. "Then, what do you mean, Prince?" Qin Wanru secretly complained. This prince would not want to do something evil again, would he? "Prince, I am only 11 years old." She meant that she was too young to be of much use at all. "No wonder you are so young." He looked at her with disdain, and then he playfully touched his chin. "Didn't you say that you want to learn medicine? Why don't you study hard and then treat my illness?" "Prince's illness, is it difficult to treat?" Qin Wanru's eyes moved to his light thin lips. They were very perfect, but the color was very light, almost pale. It could be seen that he was not in good health. In the previous life, many people guessed that this prince would not live long, but in the end, he was the one who lived the longest. "It is indeed difficult to treat. I wonder if you have any way to treat it." Chu Luchen looked at Qin Wanru's red lips with interest and asked slowly. Qin Wanru subconsciously shook her head and anxiously said, "Prince, you must be joking. You don't? Seeing that your lips are so bright, you must have an extraordinary healthcare prescription. Can you teach me?" Chu Luchen laughed, and his eyes still fell on Qin Wanru's red lips. That kind of lip color made a little girl look breathtakingly beautiful. Even if she was just a little girl who had not gotten married, one could still imagine her amazing beauty in the future. Qin Wanru's face suddenly became as pale as snow, but even so, her lips were still breathtakingly beautiful, as if the blood loss after the injury had completely disappeared. Her cherry lips trembled, and her forehead was full of sweat. She seemed to have been stabbed in the heart, and it was so painful that she almost couldn't breathe. Chapter 23. Qin Wanru's lip color had always been bright. Her grandmother said that it was because of her bright lip color that she got her nickname, Zhuozhua. There was a missing memory in her memory where she was accused of having bright lip color and seemed to be despised by everyone. She was in a worse situation because of that. But she couldn't remember the details. She only knew that everyone despised her at that time. What's wrong? Is it really a secret prescription for health, so you can't let me learn it? Chu Luchen reached out and pinched her little face when he saw her little face turn pale. He pinched her so hard that Qin Wanru looked at him with tears in her eyes. She hurriedly reached out to hold his hand, which made her forget the pain deep in her memory. Before she could reach out her hand, Chu Liuchen's hand had already retracted. Seeing that her hand didn't grab anything, he immediately laughed and swayed back and forth. The beautiful young man's presumptuous smile was infuriating. Qin Wanru's big eyes were still filled with tears. She looked at him and covered her little face with one hand, thinking that her face would definitely swell later. Forget it, I won't hold a grudge against you. I'll take your medical book and read it first. After a few days, accompany me to walk around. I haven't been to Jiangzhou yet. Chu Luchen finally stopped laughing. Looking at the aggrieved girl in front of him, he smoothly took the medical book that Qin Wanru put on the table. Open the door, I'm leaving. Open the door. Qin Wanru covered her face and stared at him in shock. Her cheeks were twitching in pain. Are you going to leave from the door, Prince? What else? You're not going to let me leave from the window, are you? I'm not in good health. Chu Luchen confidently reached out to cover his chest and coughed twice in a low voice. But how did Prince get in? Qin Wanru blinked her big black eyes and asked, looking out of the window. There were 2 guards who sent me in just now, but after I came in, I asked them to leave. Chu Luchen squinted at her playfully and impatiently patted the table with the medical book. Prince, how can I get out of the window? Qin Wanru swallowed and bit her lip. If you want me to go out, it's actually not difficult. Then leave the seal with me first. If I feel happy in Jiangzhou, I will return the seal to you. Otherwise. Seeing her look of compromise, Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. This was expected. Yes, if you want to go somewhere, I'm willing to be your guide and make you happy. Qin Wanru gritted her teeth. Prince Chen was so difficult to deal with. That's it. Chu Liuchen's face suddenly became serious. After the smile faded, his face showed some coldness. Qin Wanru was shocked and did not know what this temperamental devil wanted to do. She carefully considered and said, Your Highness, what do you mean? Your Highness, please instruct me. She had to bow her head when she was under the eaves. No matter what Prince Chen asked, she seemed to have no reason to refuse. You look quite honest now. Not bad, not bad. Girls should be so honest. The coldness on Chu Liuchen's face faded and he chuckled. With his peerless appearance, he reached out his hand again and patted Qin Wanru's head gently. But you don't look stupid. Alright, I won't make things difficult for you. It's getting late and I'm going to sleep. Chu Luchen gently yawned and threw the medical book in his hand into his sleeve. He walked to the window and immediately 2 guards appeared outside. Qin Wanru, don't fool me with the way you fool others. I'll be unhappy. He shook the thin rope on the seal in his hand and slightly raised his eyebrows, but there was a dim light in his eyes. I'm going to sleep early tonight. People who are not in good health usually go to bed early. Yes, Your Highness, I'm going to sleep early. I haven't seen Prince, let alone talk to him. Qin Wanru immediately understood the situation and said. Not bad, not bad. Chu Luchen was satisfied this time. He pressed the window with his hand, and his figure lightly fell out of the window. 2 guards hurriedly caught him outside the window, but they didn't leave immediately. One of them patted his back gently. From the direction of Qin Wanru, she saw that Chu Liuchen's face immediately became much paler and he was panting slightly. He was really in poor health. Just after a short while, he was already panting like this. She silently watched him panting for a while and then looked up with an elegant smile. He waved to Qin Wanru, who was stunned, and disappeared from her window with the 2 guards. When Qin Wanru walked to the window, there was no one outside. She closed the window and touched her face, which was still in pain. Knowing that it might be swollen tomorrow, she saw that it was getting late and went to bed. She touched her face and lay on the bed. She closed her eyes and thought in a daze, although there was someone who couldn't sleep at this time, it shouldn't be her. There was indeed someone who couldn't sleep tonight. In Madame D's courtyard, Qin Yuru, who had just escaped, was crying on the table. What? You were seen by others? What should we do? The lights in the room were bright. Madame D paced around anxiously under the light. She paced around a few times and stood beside Qin Yuru, whose eyes were also swollen from crying. She said with disappointment, "Why are you so useless? Didn't you go to see Qi Tianyu and explain what happened today? How did you end up like this?" "Mother, I don't know why this happened. I was about to explain myself and push the blame onto someone else, but a few ruffians barged in and saw me. And when they went downstairs, they even dropped their veil hats." Qin Yuru leaned on the table and cried so hard that she couldn't catch her breath. "You are so useless, you can't even do such a thing well." Madame D reached out and pressed hard on Qin Yuru's forehead. "Mother, what should I do now? What should I do now? If cousin knows, will he not marry me? What should I do?" Qin Yuru raised her head and reached out to hold Madame D's hand and begged. "Don't worry. Let me think about it." Madame D gritted her teeth and sat down on the chair opposite Qin Yuru. Of course, she was not reconciled to it. "Mother, cousin, and I love each other. He will definitely take care of me." Qin Yuru wiped her face with a handkerchief and said anxiously. "Jiangzhou is far from the capital city. You may not be able to enter the capital city in the future. The rumors are too far away. When the time comes, it will be up to us." Madame D gritted her teeth and said, "Since Qi Tianyu has already believed you, even if he enters the capital city, he won't say anything. As for the others, who will know?" Hearing Madame D's words, Qin Yuru immediately nodded. She was worried that her hard-won marriage would fall through. Now that she felt that it was okay, she naturally stopped crying. "Mother, hurry up and write a letter to my aunt to fix the marriage between my cousin and me." "I'll write a letter to my cousin later," Qin Yuru said with a blush on her face. "Mother, when you send the letter to the capital, please bring my letter to my cousin." "That's good." Madame D nodded. There was no time to lose. The marriage in Qi's mansion could be considered to be cancelled now. Don't say anything about what happened in Jiangzhou. If there are rumors in the future, blame it on your sister. Anyway, your names are similar. If someone really says something, just say that they heard it wrong. "Yes, mother, I understand. But what about this little girl? She ruined my plan. Should I let her off so easily?" Qin Yuru nodded and said unwillingly. "How can I let her off so easily? Doesn't she like to hang out with the bitches over there? In a few days, I will let them go to the family temple together. When that time comes, I won't bring her to the capital city." Madame D sneered and said, "She is just an ingrate. After raising her up, she doesn't know how to repay my kindness. She even bites back. I can't tell that she is usually obedient and timid. She is indeed a dog that bites doesn't bark." Her daughter's reputation was almost ruined. How could she let Qin Yuru off? She said it so confidently, as if Qin Wanru's father did not die to save Qin Huayong and had no choice but to entrust Qin Huayong. If it were not for Qin Wanru's father, Qin Huayong would have died at this time, and how could he become Ningyuan army general? Not bring her. Will father agree? Although Qin Yuru was happy not to bring Qin Wanru to the capital city, she and her mother would have to decide what to say. But she felt that it was unlikely. Why not? He did something wrong. Does he not know how to remedy it? Madame D said angrily. Originally, it was her idea to help Qin Huayong into Shui Rulan's room when she was drunk. But she did not expect that Qin Huayong really wanted to marry Shui Rulan. This made her so angry that her liver hurt. Yet another ingrate who seemed to be well behaved at home had actually hooked up with Qin Huayong. But, father will definitely not agree. Qin Yuru shook her head and felt that it was better to remind Madame D. Mother, if you don't let him bring this and that, father will definitely not let it go. Then let him bring that bitch. The little girl will stay here and take care of the old woman. Madame D thought for a while and still could not get rid of her anger. She slammed her hand on the table. Speaking of which, it was not only the little girl who spoiled things, but also the old woman. Father has always been filial. I'm afraid he can't do it. Then let her stay. Anyway, she is still in my hands. As long as I am in charge of her, she has to listen to me. Madame D said with her eyes shining. The next day, Qin Wanru did not wake up early. She had a dull headache. She touched her face and sat up. Hearing the sound, Qin Yu came to lift the gauze curtain. Seeing Qin Wanru on the bed, she shouted anxiously, Miss, what's wrong with your face? Why is it red and swollen? Give me a mirror. Qin Wanru sighed. Qin Yu hurriedly took a lead mirror from the dressing table. Qin Wanru took it and looked at herself in the mirror. Her skin was whiter than ordinary girls'. On such a pale little face, the red swollen mark was clearly visible. Even though she had slept for a whole night, it still did not fade. It could be seen that Chu Luchen was ruthless yesterday. Miss, did you hit your face somewhere? Qin Yu asked in confusion while looking at her face. She remembered that when she left yesterday, Mrs. Face was still fine. I don't know either. Maybe I accidentally hit something. Qin Wanru helplessly reached out to rub her little face. She returned the mirror to Qin Yu and got off the bed. Looking at the sky outside, it was getting late. It was time to go and greet Grandma. After Qin Yu helped her to freshen up, she hurried to old Grandma's courtyard. Unexpectedly, when she entered old Grandma's room, she found that the atmosphere in the room was very bad. Chapter 24. Qin Wanru stood in the corridor and didn't go over. She waved her hand at the servant girl, indicating that she didn't need to salute. What happened last night? Why did Yuru go out so late to meet with Qi Tianyu? Do you still care about your reputation? Old Grandma's voice was full of anger. Then there was a sound of something breaking. Old Grandma was so angry that she smashed the teacup. Mother, Yuru went out to buy some medicinal materials for me yesterday. She was afraid that others would see her, so she wore a veil hat. Unexpectedly, Qi Tianyu stopped her on the way. He asked Yuru to make it clear, so Yuru followed Qi Tianyu. Yuru didn't want to meet Qi Tianyu. Madame D was so scared that she knelt down and said with grievance. Buy medicinal materials? What kind of medicinal materials do you need at this time? Why did you let a girl go out so late? Old Grandma said angrily. General, you were supposed to send the herbs to the capital city by yourself. I checked it that day and found that they were not of high quality. I planned to send them to the capital city tomorrow without any delay. But I didn't expect that such a thing would happen. I was in poor health and couldn't get up for a while. Yuru felt sorry for me, so she sneaked out at night, thinking that no one would notice her. But she didn't expect that Qi Tianyu was still waiting outside. Madame D sobbed and cried, General, you know this. I told you yesterday, but you didn't take it seriously. I had no choice but to let Yuru go out. Madame D said and turned to Qin Huayong. Qin Huayong's face was also very gloomy. Madame D did say that the medicinal materials sent to the capital city were to be sent to some important people in the capital city. Qin Huayong was waiting for a chance to be transferred back to the capital city. It was indeed important to go out at this time. But he was busy recently, so he didn't care about it after hearing it. Why, is there such a thing? Yes, mother, there is such a thing. Qin Huayong frowned and said. The rumors outside were getting worse and worse. He thought it would calm down after a while, but because of what happened last night, the rumors became more and more outrageous. Although it's urgent, it's not necessary for Yuru to go out. Even if you tell me, I can go out to find some good medicinal materials. Although what Madame D said was reasonable and had Qin Huayong's testimony, old grandma did not intend to forgive her. Such a thing happened in the mansion and old grandma is old and anxious. How dare I embarrass you with such a thing? Madame D said in a wrong tone. I thought it was not a big deal and Yuru promised me again and again that it would be fine. But I didn't expect that Qi Tianyu would be alone outside our mansion. Well, there's no need to talk about this anymore. From now on, keep Yuru under control and don't let her go out. Madame Dowager said impatiently. At this point, there was no other way but to detain her. In Jiangzhou, Qin Yuru's reputation was ruined. Yes, mother, I will detain Yuru and not let her go out. I will not let Qi Tianyu frame Yuru again. Madame D said while wiping her tears. She made it sound like Qin Yuru was completely framed. Well, you can go back first. Old grandma said impatiently. Hearing that the conversation inside was almost finished, Qin Wanru signaled the servant girl to go in and report. Old grandma, second miss is here. The servant girl was also smart. She got Qin Wanru's signal and hurried in to report. Well, you can go back. Hearing that Qin Wanru had come, old grandma waved her hand and said to Qin Huayong and his wife. Mother, then we will go back. Qin Huayong nodded and stood up. The servant girl also helped Madame D up from the ground. Go and invite second miss in. Old grandma ordered. Receiving old grandma's order, the servant girl went to invite Qin Wanru in. At the door, Qin Wanru met Madame D. Seeing Qin Wanru, Madame D took 2 steps forward and held her hand. Her eyes immediately turned red and she said with pity. Wanru. I was wrong. I thought you really wanted to marry Qi Tianyu. Otherwise, even if your elder sister didn't want to marry Qi Tianyu, she wouldn't let you take his place. Qin Wanru resisted the urge to shake off her hand. She sneered in her heart. Madame D's brain worked really fast. She was planning to cover up the matter with a misunderstanding. Mother, why would you have such a misunderstanding? Qin Wanru blinked her eyes and looked at Madame D innocently. I just listened to Nanny Fang's words and thought you really wanted to marry him. I didn't expect that it was all this old maid's nonsense. She almost caused us to fall apart. Madame D's face was full of concern. She pushed all the blame to Nanny Fang. The old maid was dead, so there was no evidence. Mother, I am your biological daughter. How could you listen to an old maid's one-sided words? Moreover, it was such a big matter. Shouldn't you ask me? Qin Wanru also said with a wronged expression. She was a little girl. Her clear eyes slid from Madame D to Qin Huayong. Her eyes were slightly red, but she stubbornly did not shed tears. Qin Huayong felt guilty and distressed at the sight of her. As a mother, you can't even do your own daughter's matter? Qin Huayong could not help but say. He had always loved this little daughter. Although she was not his biological daughter, he really treated her as his own. Speaking of this matter, they did feel sorry for her. The main thing is that old maid deserved to die. Wanru, you won't hate me, right? Madame D's face was full of regret and sadness. She looked at Qin Wanru with a distressed expression. If Qin Wanru did not know, she would really think that Madame D was her biological mother. In her previous life, it was Madame D's expression that pushed her step by step into a hopeless situation. Since Madame D was good at calculating people's hearts, she would let her lose her heart today. Mother, I won't hate you. You have to take care of big sister and me. You are not in good health, so in fact, you don't have too much energy. Even if you can't take care of some things and something happened to me and big sister, it is pardonable. Qin Wanru said sincerely. Her words were very sincere because she had thought so in her previous life. Every time after something happened to her, Madame D's face was full of regret and distress. Thinking that she was her biological mother, she would always forgive her. Seeing that Qin Wanru easily listened to her words, Madame D was full of pride. She smiled and said, "It's good that you don't hate me. You and your big sister are my flesh and blood. I don't want either of you to be hurt. It's all Qi Tianyu's fault. From now on, let's not talk about it anymore. We, mother and daughter, will be fine as before." After saying that, she picked up the handkerchief in her hand and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes, looking like a kind mother who was very happy. Looking at Madame D's hypocrisy, Qin Wanru sneered in her heart. The so-called kind mother was pushing her to death. However, she was no longer the innocent Qin Wanru who didn't care about worldly affairs. Qin Wanru wanted to see how this kind mother would continue to pretend. She would make this fake kind mother show her true colors and stop her from unscrupulously dealing with her. "Mother, don't worry about me. Big sister's health is more important now." Qin Wanru calmly withdrew her hand and then bowed to Qin Huayong respectfully. She stood up and said shamefully, "Father, is mother too tired? Big sister and I always make her worry too much. She needs to assign more capable people to take care of mother." Because Qin Yuru couldn't take care of herself, this happened. Because Qin Yuru couldn't take care of herself, she went out and caused another incident last night. Now, the rumors outside were so bad that even a general like Qin Huayong, who was thicker than others, felt ashamed to go out at this time. Qin Huayong's face suddenly darkened. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, Madame D immediately knew something was wrong. "If you're busy with the family affairs, you can let other concubines take care of it. Don't let your daughter take care of the family affairs." Qin Huayong said coldly to Madame D with a cold face. Was it really wrong to raise Qin Wanru by Madame D's side? Concubine Su used to be Qin Huayong's servant girl. Later, when Madame D married into the family, she was promoted to a concubine. Because she didn't have a son or daughter, she had always been well-behaved in the mansion. Madame D felt angry. She wanted to show her filial piety at the door but was misled by Qin Wanru's words. It turned out that it was because she didn't have the ability to teach her daughter well and take care of the family affairs. But this was indeed what happened. She wanted to argue but couldn't. She only felt wronged and resentful. This little girl was indeed not as obedient as she used to be. Suddenly, old grandma's cold snort came from the room and interrupted Madame D's words. "Why are you still here? Didn't you say you were going to find a doctor for Yuru?" Qin Huayong said and walked out. Madame D had to follow him angrily. After taking 2 steps, she stopped and turned back to look at Qin Wanru. She had made up her mind. She couldn't allow this little girl to be so arrogant in the mansion. Since Yuru had made it clear to Qi Tianyu, she could borrow someone from Qi Tianyu. Qi Tianyu was this little girl's sworn enemy. This little girl could only be defeated by that person. When Qin Wanru entered the room and saw Madame Dowager, she first came up and saluted. She could tell that Madame Dowager was very unhappy and looked a little tired. She hurriedly took a few steps forward, came behind Madame Dowager, and gently massaged her shoulders. She actually did not have much strength, but seeing her kneading so hard, Madame Dowager could not help but smile. He took her hand and made her sit on the other side. "All right, don't massage me. I'm not tired." Old grandma smiled. "If you're tired, I'll massage you for you. You'll feel better after I massage you. It's autumn now. Grandma's shoulders hurt when the weather turns cold. Massage them more, and they won't hurt so much." Qin Wanru blinked her bright eyes twice, insisted on standing up, and wanted to massage Madame Dowager's shoulders. Old Grandma, second miss is so filial. She knows that old grandma's shoulders can't stand the cold, so she wants to massage old grandma's shoulders. Nanny Duan came to join in the fun. She was old grandma's most capable nanny. She had worked for old grandma for many years and knew how old grandma felt. Old grandma was amused by Nanny Duan's words. She was both relieved and sighed. In this mansion, only this little girl remembers this. The others, speaking of this, she looked gloomy. What's wrong with the others? Aunt Shui has always missed Grandma. Could it be that Grandma has forgotten Aunt Shui? Qin Wanru pouted her little red mouth and seemed to feel indignant for Shui Rulan. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.